I would like to call tonight's meeting of the San Mateo Planning Commission to order. If you all please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner John Ebnetter.
Present.
Commissioner Ellen Mallory.
Present.
Vice Chair Mike Etheridge.
Present.
Chair Diane Whitaker.
Here.
Commissioner Ramiro Maldonado is excused.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar, which consists of two sets of minutes from previous meetings, the April 23rd, 2019 Planning Commission meeting and the May 14th, 2019 Planning Commission. And there's been a request to continue the minutes from the April 23rd, 2019 meeting. It appears that not all of us have had time to review the revised minutes. So is that acceptable that we continue that to the next meeting? Well, let's have a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to continue the April 23rd, 19 minutes approval to the next Planning Commission meeting.
A second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Do we have any additions, edits, or corrections to the May 14th minutes? Nope. Okay, I'd like a motion.
Motion to approve the May 14th minutes, which were emailed. I believe those are the ones emailed Friday.
Those should have been in our packet. No? That we got last week?
Okay. Motion to approve the May 14th minutes that were in our packet we got last week.
I think we made two minor edits at the meeting on Friday. Did you get the revised ones? Okay. So we have a motion to approve. You have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Move on to public comment. This is the place on the agenda where the public can address the Planning Commission on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. Do we have any speaker slips for that?
No.
No. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and address us on an item not on tonight's agenda? Nope. Okay, seeing none, close the public comment period and move on to the public hearing. And we have the first item, number 3, which is Bay Meadows Phase 2 Development Agreement Annual Review. We'll start with the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Whitaker and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Brittany Barron, Project Manager, and the item before you this evening is the annual review of the Bay Meadows Phase 2 Development Agreement. The Bay Meadows Phase 2 Development Agreement was adopted by City Council on November 7th, 2005, and became effective December 21st, 2005. The development agreement was adopted to secure orderly development of the project consistent with the specific plan. The Planning Commission is required to undertake an annual review and determine the good faith compliance by the owner with the terms of the development agreement. This is a 13th year review of an 18-year agreement. The Phase 2 specific plan amendment allows for a maximum of 1,250 housing units, 1.25 million square feet of office space, 150,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space, a private high school with 450 students, 3 new public parks totaling 15 acres, and 2.8 acres of private open space. Here's a photo simulation of Bay Meadows at full build-out. The 13th annual review period spans from December 21st, 2017 to December 20th, 2018. No specific items were required during this time. The owner has complied with the terms of the agreement. Now I would like to provide the Commission with a few notable updates from 2018. Station 3 is a second office building built and completed at Bay Meadows. This building was designed and constructed with LEED Gold standards, and it is fully occupied. Construction progressed on Station 2, the third of 5 office buildings at Bay Meadows, and in late 2018, they received temporary certificate of occupancy. This building is also anticipated LEED Gold certification and anticipates tenant occupancy in the coming months. Sales of Victory Homes, the 24 single-family homes sold out in 2018. Construction continues and is expected to be completed on the last 3 remaining homes by spring. The Bridge Affordable Housing Project to construct 68 below market rate residential units was entitled in January 2018 and broke ground in 2019. There are currently 3 businesses occupying storefronts in Town Square: Rome Artisan Burgers, Blue Bottle Coffee, and Tin Pot Creamery. And Lift Fitness, a fitness studio located on the ground floor of Station 4, opened its doors in February 2018. Again, this is the annual review of the development agreement, year 13. No specific items were required during this time, and the owner has complied with the terms of the development agreement. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Planning Commission Resolution number 2019-1, finding that Bay Meadows Main Track Investors LLC has complied in good faith with the terms of the Bay Meadows Phase 2 development agreement for the review period of December 21st, 2017 to December 20th, 2018. This concludes staff's presentation. I am available to answer any questions, and we also have Whitney Welsh here, the project manager for Wilson Meany, to answer any questions you may have as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the Planning Commission have any questions of staff? No? Okay. So we'll have the applicant come forward. We need the microphone on, please. Thank you.
Hi. So my name is Whitney Welsh with Whistling Meany, and I'm available for questions or a project update if you'd like one. But we generally have complied with the terms of the development agreement.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, any questions for the applicant?
Just one question through the chair. This does not address the compliance. This is just a question because a retail update was provided. What is the percentage occupancy of the available retail space right now? Because it does seem like there's a lot of available space.
So we have it's about just under, probably about, I would say 35% occupied. So in the town square, there's the MU4 building and the Res 7 building. So Res 7 is where the 3 retail buildings are that Brittany reported on. So Rome, Tin Pot, and Blue Bottle. We are working on the MU4 building. We've had many very close to executed deals, but unfortunately many of the small businesses that we've been talking to have difficulty closing loans. And it's just, the market is very high for construction costs for build outs for small businesses, and those are the groups that are most attracted to that space. So we continue to recruit appropriate retail groups and have conversations with them. We've been very, very close, many years. And then in the bottom of Station 4, we have Lift Fitness, and then we've recently gone through and done tenant improvements in the base of that building to subdivide the remaining retail space to make it more attractive for smaller uses. We had hoped to get one larger user, but we've gone ahead and subdivided, and that construction is just near completion, so hopefully we'll be in a place for smaller retail groups to move forward quickly.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Through the chair.
Yes.
This might not be the correct time to ask this question, yet I think later in 2018, or late in 2018, we may have looked at Franklin Templeton's, or early in 2018, and there was an easement from Bay Meadows onto Franklin Templeton's property. How did that all work out?
So I'm still working with Public Works on that issue and Bay Meadows, actually. And so this might be too much detail, but on the final map, there was a 60-foot easement dedicated that was for a public service easement, which would be utilities, and for an emergency vehicle access easement. The map did not show the public access easement that was contemplated in one of the conditions of approval. And so 2 years later, in 2012, Bay Meadows recorded an amended declaration of conditions, covenants, and restrictions that says the area shown as the public service easement and emergency vehicle access easement is also dedicated to be a joint access easement. And so that was accomplished via a declaration that's recorded against the property. What we're working on right now is the wording of that declaration is slightly different from the wording of Condition of Approval 19, because Condition of Approval 19 referenced a public access easement, and what was recorded is a joint access easement. So there's still some work to be done to get to the bottom of that.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question.
Yes.
And maybe you answered it earlier and I didn't quite understand it, but the large space where we're hoping to get a restaurant
Yes.
on the town square.
Yes.
Is that the one you spoke of earlier?
That's MU4, the base of MU4, yes.
Okay, so we're still,
So we're still really
Still
wanting a restaurant, yes.
Okay.
And it may end up being two smaller restaurants as opposed to one large restaurant, but we're really still targeting restaurant uses, and we really envision a full, bar, cocktail service, a sit-down restaurant is what we would aspire to have.
so if it ends up being two retail uses, would the size of each be similar to what, say, Rome Burger has now?
No,
or-
they would be larger than that. So it could be divided into as many as 4 retail spaces along that side. And we also have, if you recall, there's a trellis with outdoor seating. So we have a whole plan for expanded outdoor seating. We have the heat lamps and everything. So there will be outdoor seating with that restaurant space as well. So that expands the kind of usability of the space significantly.
I mean, I just thought of another question. I think the original documents called for permanent retail uses in locations such as where Fieldwork is now.
Yes. The B parcels.
Is that still?
That's
part of the
still
plan?
something that could happen.
Yeah.
We are really focusing on finding retail tenants first for
Yeah.
the ground floor, so we sort of need to prove those spaces work before we can proceed with the B parcels.
So Fieldwork will be there for a while longer.
They're doing very well.
Yes.
The community loves them.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No,
No?
just a comment that
A
I'm in
comment.
support of fieldwork.
Yeah, the last time I was there in March and it was pouring down rain.
Ah,
So it was very interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's good for all of the greenery.
Yes. Okay, if there's no questions or further comments, look for a motion.
We should open the public.
Oh, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to do that. Do we have speakers for this item?
No.
No. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak on this agenda item? Nope, okay, we'll close the public comment period. And now I can ask for a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt Planning Commission Resolution Number 2019-1, finding that Bay Meadows Main Track Investors LLC has complied in good faith with the terms of the Bay Meadows Phase 2 Development Agreement for the review period of December 21, 2017 to December 20, 2018.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
And this action is final with the Planning Commission unless appealed to the City Council in accordance with the San Mateo Municipal Code.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. And it gets. You ready? Okay.
Good evening, Chair Whitaker and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Rendell Bustos, Associate Planner and Staff Planner for the projects before you this evening, which is a public hearing for a new mixed-use building located at 406 East 3rd Avenue, PA 2018-043, as well as a modification to an approved project located at 405 East 4th Avenue, PA 2019-015. Beginning with the project site, 406 East 3rd Avenue, shown in yellow, is comprised of 3 parcels that would be merged into one parcel totaling to 38,516 square feet. The project site is bound by East 3rd Avenue to the north, South Railroad Avenue to the west, and South Claremont Street to the east. The San Mateo downtown Caltrain station is less than a quarter of a mile from the north of the project site. The existing uses include a fast food restaurant, auto repair, and industrial businesses. The subject project also abuts the project located at 405 East 4th Avenue to the south, shown in blue, which is currently under construction. The subject parcel is zoned CBD/S, Central Business District Support, denoting the site's adjacency to the downtown core. The general plan land use map designates the site as downtown retail core support and is located within the downtown plan study area. The proposed mixed-use project consists of a 4-story mixed-use building with offices among all floors, 25 residential units on the 4th floor, and 2 levels of underground parking. The exterior improvements include ground floor, 3rd floor, and 4th floor open space, and landscaping includes the removal of all existing on-site trees and 3 street trees, and the replacement of those trees with a total of 7 new street trees. The Planning Commission reviewed the subject project as a study session in July of 2018. The main comments from the Planning Commission pertained to parking, additional residential units, a distinguished building design from the adjacent project, as well as ground floor retail. And since the study session, the project has been modified to incorporate a modified building design and 2 more residential dwelling units than what was presented to the Commission at the study session. With regard to parking, the project includes a total of 176 parking spaces on site among 2 levels of underground parking, 13 of which are secured parking spaces devoted to the residential units. The proposed garage would be accessible from the project's East 3rd Avenue driveway and from South Claremont Street from the adjacent project, as the 2 garages are proposed to be connected. The parking garage is also expected to be made public during off-work hours. The total required parking spaces is 283 parking spaces, which the remainder of the 105 parking spaces would be paid for via CPID parking in lieu fees. A traffic impact analysis, or TIA, was conducted for the project by Hexagon. The TIA concludes that the project would generate 492 net new daily trips and concludes that the 15 studied signalized intersections are expected to operate at an acceptable level of service at mid LOS D or better. The project also implements measures and programs as part of a Transportation Demand Management Plan, or TDM plan, such as bike share, showers, clothes lockers, and Caltrain Go passes that in combination with the project's location would result in a total trip reduction of approximately 36.6%. The applicant has agreed to devote 11% of the total residential dwelling units to the very low income category as a state density bonus request. Given this and the project's proximity to a major transit stop, the project is entitled to a parking ratio of a 0.5 space per bedroom. The project is also allowed 2 concessions or incentives requests given the affordability level provided. The 2 concession requests are increased floor area and 16 tandem parking spaces shown in red. The project was reviewed by the city's design review consultant, Larry Cannon of Canada Design Group, and the architect has prepared a material sample board which has been passed around to the Planning Commission. The primary concern with the study session building design was the project's similarity to the adjacent project at 405 East 4th Avenue. Larry Cannon concludes, though, that the massing relates to the adjacent project, but includes materials and colors that differentiate the building, break up the mass of the building, and relate to other downtown buildings. So in this next series of slides, they're going to be the exterior elevations as shown at the study session in July of 2018 to the Commission versus the current design. So first, along South Claremont Street, the design incorporates, as shown on the right, additional 3-story brick elements to the left of the building, as well as a different variety of brick veneer. And then along East 3rd Avenue, the design incorporates additional brick and window detailing on the left-hand side, as well as a lighter stucco color and brick color. And lastly, along South Railroad Avenue, the design incorporates a 3-story brick feature toward the right-hand side and shifts the stucco and brick colonnade to the left-hand side, and thus reduces the apparent amount of glass visible at the corner of South Railroad and 3rd Avenue. And as previously mentioned, the Planning Commission at the July 2018 study session commented on the similarity of the design of the adjacent project, and so these next slides will show the resultant appearance along South Claremont Avenue and South Railroad Avenue. So firstly, along South Claremont Street, to the left is the approved project at 405 East 4th Avenue, and to the right is the proposed project at 406 East 3rd Avenue. And second, along South Railroad Avenue, to the left is the proposed project at 406 East 3rd Avenue, and the adjacent approved project to the right. And the second project before the Planning Commission this evening is to modify the approved project at 405 East 4th Avenue. Noted as the north elevation in the plans and in the administrative report, the north elevation highlighted in blue would be concealed from view as a result of the proposed project at 406 East 3rd. And so as approved, the north wall is to have applied brick veneer and stucco relief patterns, and the project requests to be fully stucco given that the wall would be covered by the proposed adjacent project given their similarity in height. All other elevations of the approved project would remain as approved. So before we conclude, I will note that there was one public comment submitted to the Planning Commission after distribution of this evening's packet. A hard copy of that comment has since been distributed to the Planning Commission. And secondly, in conversation with the Department of Public Works and the applicant, condition of approval number 53, called encroachment permits, bonds, and insurance, has been modified. A copy of the revised condition of approval has been distributed to the Planning Commission with those changes highlighted. And so to conclude, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission motions to adopt the mitigated negative declaration as adequate to assess the environmental impacts of the project, based on the findings for approval in Attachment 1. Approve the site plan and architectural review for the construction of a new mixed-use building, site development plan application for tree removal, and tentative parcel map to merge 4 parcels into 1 parcel. based on the findings for approval in Attachment 1 and subject to the conditions of approval in Attachment 2, with the modification to condition of approval number 53. And lastly, to approve the site plan and architectural review modification for a modified exterior wall design based on the findings for approval in Attachment 3 and subject to the conditions of Attachment 4. So this concludes staff's presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission may have. A representative from the city's environmental consultant, David J. Powers, and from the traffic consultant, Hexagon, are present this evening should there be questions related to the environmental document or traffic impact analysis, respectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions of staff?
I actually have a Public Works question. In the application, it gives the city ability to pay for parking in the underground parking on the weekend, and it has an 8 o'clock stop time, 8 p.m. Is there any way that that can be raised to 10 p.m., or is that a Public Works rule?
Could you repeat that? I'm not quite sure I understand.
In the parking structure of this building underground, public parking is available until 8 p.m. on the weekend. Is that a Public Works decision that it be through 8 o'clock, or is that an applicant decision?
I'm not really sure. It had to do with the agreement they were doing. That might be a question that the...
I question the applicant.
Yeah, because I'm sure they're probably matching what the parking garage next door was doing. So you're talking about where they're offering to use it. Yeah. So the hours, I'm not sure where that came.
The hours would be agreed upon through the agreement between the city and the applicant. And in speaking with our parking manager, Sue Ellen Atkinson, the hours, we would prefer they match the hours allowed in the adjacent project, which off the top of my head, I will try to repeat. On Mondays through Fridays, I believe, is 6 p.m. to 12 a.m., and then on Saturdays and Sundays, 9 a.m. to 12 a.m. So the hours noted in the TDM plan are suggested hours, but the city has the ability to change that through the agreement.
Okay, back up a minute. That those were the hours that are in the parking plan for the city?
In the transportation demand management plan,
Okay.
prepared by an outside consultant.
Okay, so those are much more extended than what we see here, is that?
Correct. Yeah, the hours on the weekends at least are shorter as shown in the TDM plan. But again, the city's preference would be that they match what's allowed for in the adjacent project, which is longer and later into the evening.
And then if that's approved in the adjacent project, can that be revisited, or is that a done deal?
Well, again, what I would note is the limited hours you're referring to are in the TDM plan. We're going to go beyond those. What happens is once assuming a project is approved, then the Public Works will negotiate the parking agreement with the applicant, which would be very similar to the one next door, which goes to midnight, essentially. Right. So it's not going to end at 8 p.m.
Okay, now I got you.
Okay. So what we're
I think the
seeing- what we're
TDM plan
seeing in
just
the-
said, for instance.
Okay, so
but
what we're
that's
seeing
not
in the report is not necessarily then what
Correct,
it's going to be.
correct,
All right,
correct.
that's good.
Yeah, those are just suggestions. And yeah, there's been no actual agreement that's been made at this point.
Okay. Okay, those are my only staff questions. I have questions for the applicant.
Staff?
Sure. Through the chair. There's a little confusion on the amount of units as far as I can tell. If you look at page 4 of 7 in the report, paragraph 2 says there's going to be 27 units, and I think it should say 25. There's one place where it says 26. I think that's in a consultant's report, but it is 25, correct?
That's correct. So on page 4, that is a typo. It's 25 units total.
Okay. So same minor thing with the parking in lieu. I believe there's a total of 283 parking spots scheduled. And I believe that would mean, and you have 178 on site, so I think that would leave you with, is it 107?
105. 105 spaces at this point would be required for CPID and lieu fees.
Okay, so that's right. The parking, or the, on page 4, again, it says 176 parking spaces. I think it should say 178. Seems to be 2 missing.
I'm trying to refer to the factual data sheet. Okay, I'm glad I brought a calculator because on site it really is 176 spaces.
So
it's
it should
my
be
error. So
107.
it should be 107.
Okay, so I know this will probably be discussed a little bit further, a little bit more going forward, but with the tandem spots, if they are allowed, they would count as 2 spots.
So the 176 includes the tandem spaces.
As single or double?
Well, as
It's 2.
You would
As-
count both of them, the one in the front and the one in the back. I think
yeah,
that's
so
the question.
double.
Yeah, it's not a single spot, it's 2 spots.
It's 2 spaces, yeah.
Okay. What is the cost of a single spot for the parking in lieu fee that the applicant would pay if it's accepted?
I had it in a previous slide, but it's just over $25,000 per space.
Okay, and is a typical parking stall 12 by 18?
No, it varies. So depending on whether it's adjacent to a wall or a column, the minimum for non-compact, so standard, is 8.5. I believe it's by 18, and it jumps up a little bit if it's adjacent to a wall. Jumps down a little bit if it's compact.
Okay. I think that was it for now. Thank you.
Mike, do you have any questions?
No, not for.
So there seemed to be a little confusion. I had confusion in one of the letters from the public about the mitigated negative deck, because it's, in one place it's described as an initial study, and then I also found it described as a draft report. So if staff could explain the different terminologies and.
Well, it's a draft until it's approved. So
Okay.
it's not going to be final because that's one of the reasons we're having the hearing tonight.
Right.
I'm not sure if any members of the public. So the initial study is the basis to determine whether or not there's potential for any significant impacts. If there are any potential significant impacts, whether or not they can be mitigated. And as such, the finding is yes. So therefore, there's a negative declaration that's prepared based on the findings and the documentation that's in the initial study. It's titled as a draft because you haven't adopted it yet.
But that's one document. We don't see it
We
twice
usually,
as a.
we
No,
usually put them
okay.
together, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other follow-up questions? Applicant's presentation?
Sure. If not, I can click for you.
We need, not turned on. Okay, there you go.
Good evening. Okay, it's working. Thank you. It's good to be with you tonight, and I'll cover a little bit of what staff covered, and maybe a little repetition. So I'll try and move through some of those slides, and then feel free if any questions arise. Let's see here. I got it. It's on. I think. There you go. And then this way. It doesn't like me right there. Here. Does that make a difference? There you go. Okay. There you go. You got to crawl back behind it. I can see it. It's a miracle. Okay. Thank you, Rendell. So a little bit about Windy Hill. I know that we've been before you before, but we're a downtown San Mateo property owner. We do mostly mixed use, commercial and multifamily apartment projects. All of our projects are here locally in the Bay Area, most of them in downtown communities. We have projects in downtown San Mateo, downtown Redwood City, downtown Belmont, San Carlos, and also a project in Palo Alto. Our most current project here in San Mateo is almost done, a couple more months. Hopefully as you drive by there, it's helping it come to life a little bit as the brick is installed. This project in particular, we have been working on for some time now. We've had a study session last year. We've really doubled our efforts to be involved in the community, especially immediately adjacent to the project. And that's resulted in some added public benefits on this project vis-a-vis the last project. In addition, one of the comments from our last meeting was to really try and see if we can get more units on the project. And so we reconfigured and were able to add 2 additional units to bring our total up to 25 units. And with 3 of those units being designated as very low income. One of the other comments that we received was the size of the glass corner. And this was a comment that we received not only from the Planning Commission, but also from folks in the community. And so we worked with the architectural design consultant to come up with, and staff, to come up with a solution that still allowed us to maintain the architectural language, but also to reduce that element in size. And so you'll see that in these renderings. We also, there was some feedback on the outdoor area that we created along 3rd to try and add some screening for not only noise, but also to kind of differentiate it a little bit. And so you'll see that in some of the renderings, as well as some of the enhanced brick detailing that we did on this building vis-a-vis the adjacent building. So I'm sure you're pretty familiar with the project area. It's the Kentucky Fried Chicken with some industrial buildings along Claremont. It's obviously, has a lot of the same wonderful things going for it as the prior project. It's, in a very close proximity to the rail, a lot of the amenities, B Street specifically, which is, kind of the heart of Restaurant Row in San Mateo. We were able to get a fairly substantial piece of land, which provided some good flexibility on the design. So this is a project site plan. We're excited to be stretching these pedestrian environments further along Claremont. You'll see that some of our community benefits directly correlate to the fact that we are striving to improve significantly the pedestrian access to the downtown, specifically from the residential neighborhoods. And you'll see, this looks substantially the same as you saw it last time. Randall's already talked about that, where the dotted line on the bottom picture represents what will be covered up. So essentially all of it will be covered up by the proposed project. Let's see. So we already talked about 25 units. It's a mix of studios and ones. These units are a little bit larger than the units were on the prior project. They're 520 to 650 square feet. They're on the 4th floor, and they're also set back to provide patio area and also kind of a visual separation. The very low income units we think are really beneficial as opposed to going low income or something of that nature. It really, hopefully, is geared towards identifying a subset that has a harder time finding those kind of units. Those are pretty high in demand, especially near these downtown submarkets, where some of these folks probably, will likely work in downtown. The office is approximately 104,000 square feet, and it's on levels 1 through 3 predominantly, with a small area on level 4 with the outdoor balcony. Let's see. The 3rd level has setbacks and terraces which again are all meant to, we worked with the architectural consultant to make sure that those did what they were intended to do, which is to reduce the massing of the building and make it more attractive. Let's see. We've talked a little bit about some of these improvements. You're well aware of most of them, but all the improvements in the downtown walkable, sustainable streets plan will be implemented here, and we're excited for what's going to happen at the corner of 3rd Avenue. We think it'll be a nice gateway into the downtown, and will improve the environment there. So part of the public improvements that we're proposing is really driven towards getting pedestrians safely onto B Street. So what we're proposing is to improve the pedestrian safety at every intersection, coming up 4th and then crossing across Claremont where the new sidewalks will be, and getting you all the way to B Street. And so this will include new electronic PED buttons, as well as countdowns, and putting in the truncated domes and ramps where none exist today. And so that was a public benefit that we worked with staff, the community, and Public Works to identify and to come up with. In addition to that, there's also proposed is a, what are those signs called? Those, here's how fast you're going sign on 4th, which will be studied by the city, and there's dollars allocated to providing that improvement as well. So I can go through the design. We worked, tirelessly with Larry Cannon. We were pleased with the outcome. I think on our prior 2 projects in San Mateo, there's always been kind of some questions left unanswered with Larry Cannon. But on this project, I think we were able to really address all the concerns that he had and that the Planning Commission had, at least we hope we have. And so we're very happy with the outcome. Let me see if I need to. So same sort of parking design, 2 levels of below grade. The garages will actually be able to function as one, which from a circulation standpoint will be really beneficial, and I'll talk more about that in a coming slide. TDM program, and so this is something that is really important to us, and is continuing to become more and more important to San Mateo. Caltrain Go Passes, bicycle parking, on-site amenities to encourage people to ride their bikes, and then various TMA seed money, which is something that San Mateo is going to continue to focus on. And then we've talked about in lieu fees, and then the voluntary on-site evening and weekend parking that will mirror the other project. So as far as hours go, et cetera, we would propose that it mirror the 4th and Claremont project. And because they'll essentially function as one garage. So this is a view of 3rd Avenue and the railroad in the corner. And so you'll notice that the glass element on Railroad was once about 40 feet long. It's now 12 feet long. So we've minimized it pretty significantly. You'll see how the brick and stucco columns break up the facade, and also we have a reveal in the stucco, which kind of, if you walk around downtown, there's several historic buildings which have a similar reveal like that. We have the outdoor patio area with some of the architectural glazing there that we're pretty excited about. We think it'll look pretty cool once it's constructed. Here's a view of South Claremont Street. Again, trees, benches, planters, brick inlay. You'll notice that we vary the materials on every level of the building. And even on the 4th floor, where we go from wood to metal panel to stucco, and the varying of those materials is certainly very intentional. This shows you the other outdoor area on Claremont Street. That'll give an opportunity for folks to rest their feet if they're walking to and from. But it's a nice kind of carve out into the side of the building. This shows you from across 3rd Avenue in Claremont, gives you an idea with the adjacent retail building, what the massing looks like. Obviously, we were able to cut windows in by recessing the building about 3 feet off the property line here. So we're not up against the property line. We've recessed it in order to provide that glazing, and that was done for architectural reasons to avoid having a blank wall. Let's see. I don't know what that slide is. That's another view, I guess. Or is that the end? Is that the end? Okay. That was easy. Not so bad. Any questions for me now, or shall I have a seat?
Does this complete the applicant's presentation? Okay. Do we have questions? You do, but you don't want to start. Do you have questions? You want to hear from the public first?
Same.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have a seat. We'll hear from the public, and then we'll probably bring you back to the speaker podium. Okay. Do we have speaker slips?
Yes, 5.
5? And you have 2 more. That's 7. Shall we use the timer? Okay. Going to use the timer. We're going to set it for 3 minutes, and you can watch for the green light that turns amber, that then turns red, and that means your time is up. And you can call the first speaker, please.
Lori, followed by Dino.
Hello, my name's Lori Wishart, and I am a business owner of EMC Insurance, which is one of the retail spaces that's adjacent. So I just have I have some questions, and one of them is the property we're talking about is just that's going to be incorporated is just the Kentucky Fried Chicken spot. It's none of the retail that's adjacent, correct?
We'll take the questions and answer at the end.
Okay, so that's one of my first questions, and I also have a question about the parking and the parking circulation. Parking is such an issue there already. It's difficult for us and for everybody there, and so how the parking will circulate is really important. The in and outs, and I didn't hear anything in the presentation about where the ins and outs would be. Also. There's the street closure for the building that's being built now is really basically closed down Claremont Street and has closed down half of 4th. So I'm wondering what the plan is for if that's going to be continued on Claremont, and are we going to have a lot of 3rd Avenue closed down, and kind of for how long? And I'm also noticing that the plan is to build to the lot line. Is there going to be any mitigation on noise? It's we have a business that requires us to be able to speak to people, and it would be very disruptive if there wasn't some mitigation on noise. So those are basically my questions. Just as a person who is a resident of the downtown area, the 0.5 per bedroom parking is totally unrealistic. People, whether they drive or whether they live next door to where they work, they still have cars. And people, because the rents are so expensive, double up on rents, so you might have a studio with 2 cars. So if you don't have sufficient parking, people just park on the streets, which makes the parking problem more difficult, and that means that they go to residential areas or other areas or skip from one place to the other, or park in the city lots. That's pretty much my question and my concerns. And will they be able to answer those questions now, or are they going to answer them later?
We're going to collect them and answer them all at the end.
Okay, that's
But
fine.
Could I ask you what street your business is located on?
Yeah, our business is on 3rd Avenue.
Between?
3rd Avenue, it's 414. There's Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's a dry cleaner that's a small local business. There's an insurance business. And then there are the 2 restaurants, the Vietnamese restaurant and the Japanese restaurant. And I live on Fremont Street, which is 3 blocks away. So I know that area very well.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Dino, followed by Carla Woodworth.
Good evening, Chair Whitaker, Commissioners. My name is Dino Antoniazzi, and I'm here representing my father, Max, who's 93 years old, has owned the property. He's sitting here in the front row. Has owned the property for many years, as you may know. I know the Commission understands our concerns and our feelings towards the project. We'd like the project to go ahead, but with some important changes. At the last study session, there wasn't a rendering of the 3rd Avenue straight on with our property and showing the garage and how it's going to lay out. And on the new rendering, it shows how it's going to look. And for many reasons, we still feel that the garage should not be on 3rd Avenue. First of all, aesthetically, the large garage opening is surrounded with brick and stucco, which draws your eye to this, big garage, and it kind of makes the entrance disappear. It just kind of looks like all one. And of course, there's a lot of safety issues that come along with this being on 3rd Avenue. The garage creates a barrier. We still feel it creates a barrier between the retail and the downtown, with cars coming in and out. I think the pedestrians that are going to our stores or coming to work, it becomes a safety issue. Vehicles entering, it said in the report that vehicles are allowed to enter in and out in both directions. At the last study session, there was some comment that, well, maybe they can just come eastbound, and then what are we going to do about them, trying to cross on 3rd into the garage? Well, there was some things that said they're going to put maybe some pylons there or a barrier, but I've seen it before. Those pylons are going to get, hit all the time, and then Public Works will be out there once a week fixing them. And this is our gateway, and we don't want to see these pylons in our gateway or cement barriers. There's many people that are going to commute from the train, and the easiest way for them to go, speaking of safety, is they're not going to walk down 2nd Avenue or 1st Avenue to Claremont. They're going to come down Railroad and cross at 3rd and Railroad, where there's no pedestrian crossing. And then with a lot of cars, with potentially 200 cars coming in and out in the morning with people going to work, these buildings I think can hold about 400 people. I mean, there's going to be a lot of area where these people could be in danger. And also the city council once said that maybe they were thinking of making 3rd Avenue one way. So if they do one way either direction, where are those cars going to go when they come out? They have to go through downtown or come in through downtown to service this garage. And the only power pole that's not in this picture that is on our property only services one property and aesthetically doesn't look good. And I don't know if Public Works can work with that, but since then, Mr. Fields did offer to look into that and do the sidewalk repair as needed.
Can you begin to wrap up, please?
Okay. And most importantly, we want to preserve the existing retail and for our customers during construction to leave, the parking available, the street not closed, and so they can thrive. And because this is not just 6 months of construction, it's many years of construction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carla Woodworth, followed by David Karp.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Carla Pecolo Woodworth, and I represent my mom, Mary Pecolo, and the late Victor Pecolo, who owned the businesses, the buildings that house the businesses for Fuji, Sukiyaki, and the dining room for Saigon City. So the rest of the street after the Antoniazzi properties. I'm going to start by saying in no way do my parents, my late father and mother, but oppose any development in San Mateo. They're longtime San Mateo citizens, but there are concerns, and so I'm going to second everything that Dino just mentioned because we completely share those concerns. What I do want to talk a little bit about is just preserving as a condition of approval. Dino, I'm just going to follow up on the last comment that he made. We really would like some assurances that parking will be available and that the street will remain open during that 3-year project. Lori mentioned it as well. Don't know you, Lori, but I agree with you. This is critical to the existing businesses that are housed by our buildings. They've been in operation for a long time, long-standing, good retail in the city. And should operation of these businesses be interrupted due to street closing or to limited parking during construction, this is going to impact not only these businesses, but also the income and livelihood of our aging parents. And they depend on this as a source of their income. So if this project is approved, we'd like to know how this is going to be enforced. And then just as a question for the commission, I know that the commission, we're just interested in hearing your impressions on how the current project reflects the commission's last study session request to incorporate certain items. I heard a little bit of that earlier, but there was a better gateway design, relocation of the parking entrance was discussed, more housing, integration of retail space, relocation of the open space for the project. I do have some concerns about noise, and I think Mike mentioned a little bit about that vibration, that kind of thing, and some additional parking, which is always a problem. So thank you.
Thank you.
David Karp, followed by James Wang. James Wang, followed by Adam Nugent.
Chairwoman Whitaker and members of the Planning Commission, my name is James Wang. I am a resident on Fifth Avenue, not far from the project. I am also here today representing the Central Neighborhood Association. The Central Neighborhood Association supports the Windy Hill project at 406 East 3rd Avenue, and we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude for all the efforts the developer, Mike Fields, has made in directly improving our neighborhood in this project as well as past projects. This project will bridge the downtown to the east side of the tracks in an effective and aesthetically pleasing manner. Windy Hill has shown themselves to be reasonable, accommodating, and willing to invest and work hard to help our neighborhood. We have tried to get green pedestrian street lamps for our neighborhood for the last 22 years, and Windy Hill has managed to help move the needle on this particular issue where the city has repeatedly failed. However, there are some issues that we would like to bring to your attention regarding this project. First, in design. There are new sources of light and glare from the exterior building materials on the 3rd Avenue and railroad sides of this building, which might impact the surrounding area and residents. We would like to see this addressed. Second, on parking. 105 parking spaces will be paid for by in lieu fees, and we believe these missing parking spaces could cause overflow into our residential streets. Therefore, we would like the city to consider extending the residential parking permit program for the 500 to 600 blocks of South Delaware, South El Dorado, and Fremont streets for protection of the residents' ability to park near their properties. Finally, we are concerned about traffic. The study shown has, the traffic study has shown that there will be 492 net new trips. 20% of that traffic will take place on Delaware Street, 50% will come in from 101, 25% from each direction of 101. We have some questions about this traffic impact. How can we reduce the traffic impact and improve pedestrian safety on Delaware, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th Avenues? For example, a 25-mile-per-hour speed monitor on 4th Avenue could help reduce the high accident numbers that we are already experiencing at 4th and Humboldt. Finally, how will this redirection of traffic be addressed on other streets if a lane is closed on 3rd Avenue or on South Claremont Street during the construction period? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jordan Grimes. Adam Nugent, followed by Jordan Grimes.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I am the president of Handsome North Central, but these comments are my own. So I just wanted to note that I'm a neighbor and I live on Delaware. Overall, I'm excited about the project. I do want to note that I wish there had been more housing for this project. There's a lot of office going in here, and we definitely need to keep our tax base healthy, but we also need to provide housing, and this is a great spot to do it. I also wanted to note a little bit about the architecture, and I know Central Neighborhood had mentioned some issues about glazing and glare. I would recommend that we just beef up the mullions of the major glass panel areas. There's another project by the same architect that I wanted to bring and just highlight what they did at their tower at the corner of their project. So I just want to recommend something that happened to the mullions to reduce some of the glare issues that they might be concerned about. And then overall, I also want to second that the residential parking permit program would be great to extend further into the neighborhoods. North Central doesn't have any parking. I don't really care about that. It's more a matter of, helping send an olive branch to residential neighborhoods because, we need to continue to improve the downtown, and this is one of the ways we do it. So those are my comments. Otherwise, I'm excited for this project. I wish there was more residential. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Jordan Grimes, followed by David Karp.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your time this evening. Jordan Grimes, 19th Avenue Park resident here in support of the project. So just a couple things right off the bat. This is a really good, in my opinion, transit-oriented development. This is sort of what transit-oriented development should look like. There are two things that I think could make it better, though. The first, in contrast with the other speakers, I actually think there's way too much parking in this project. You're talking about a project that is downtown, that is primarily office space, that is well served by the train, where the applicants are providing Caltrain Go passes. So essentially, you're taking the biggest drawback of the train, the price, and taking that away completely. That's a huge deal. You now have free public transit to work in which you do not have to sit in traffic. That's a major, major thing. I don't think it should be overlooked when we're talking about how much parking is needed. I'd also mention that the Mid-Penn project that's going to be coming online downtown, that's being considered, one of the points of that is a massive new parking structure. When we're talking about this many spaces in a project like this, we should be considering that as well. The other thing, and there's not really much that can be done at this point, but when you look at the office space provided, it's around 105,000 square feet, which is roughly 500 new employees. The project has 27 new housing units. And that's, frankly, not the developer's fault. That's us. That's our heightened density restrictions. We prevent housing from being built by restricting it to densities that make it basically impossible for it to pencil out, as Mike noted at the last council meeting. Anyway, I just think we're talking about parcels downtown which are very limited in supply. This one's going to go forward, and I think should go forward, but when we're thinking about the future, 40 residential units on a little over a half acre aren't going to pencil out. What will likely pencil out is, and as is seen in the Mid-Penn project downtown, you can pretty easily do 100 to 150 units on an acre. I think that's more the speed that we need to be thinking about. And again, we have a limited amount of land in downtown. We should be using it to the fullest and densest and tallest amount that we can. So just wanted to say that, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
David Karp.
No. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address the commission on this project? You can fill out the speaker slip afterwards. Nope, seeing none, we'll close the public comment on this item. Shall we have staff answer the questions from public first? Yep.
Thank you. So I'm going to point to our presentation for the first question related to which sites are being developed. So in this slide, sorry, I think I might have missed one of them, pardon me. Shown in yellow are 3 of the 4. This shown here, where it's not highlighted, is one of the subject sites, so this site. I apologize. So the boundary ultimately is this. And so it preserves these, the one-story restaurant and retail businesses.
So the answer, the verbal answer to that question was it's the Kentucky Fried Chicken building and parking lot, and then it's the 3, we'll call them auto businesses that front on Claremont.
Correct. So this is the KFC, and these 3 are the either auto or industrial uses. There was a question raised, a few questions raised related to the parking and circulation. And I'm going to point to another slide. It might be the most helpful to just use this one. So there's 2 garage entrances. The proposed project would incorporate a garage entrance along East 3rd Avenue. And given that it shares access with the adjacent project's garage, which is approximately this boundary, that garage provides an entrance along South Claremont Street. And another question was posed related to the in and out access of East 3rd Avenue. And this diagram doesn't show it, but there is a median proposed along East 3rd Avenue, which would restrict access to right in only and restrict exiting to right out only. And other questions related to traffic and parking, Hexagon is present this evening should there be further questions from the commission or if they'd like to clarify any questions posed by the members of the public. There's also a question related to state density bonus and it being 0.5 spaces per bedroom and that being insufficient. The attorney's office can clarify if I misspeak, but 0.5 spaces per bedroom is permitted by the statute, provided it is within a half mile of a major public transit stop and provides a certain level of affordability. And then lastly, there were questions raised related to street closures and caused by the construction. Public Works can answer questions related to that.
Yes. So, well, first about the residential parking program, that there's a procedure in place. Any neighborhood can request, their streets to be part of the residential parking program, and they basically it's a process in which they get signatures from all the residences there showing support for it. They turn it into the city's traffic department, Public Works traffic department, and then they study it. They go and look at it and whether it qualifies and all. But there is a procedure, so they can certainly request that for the extra blocks or 2 that they were talking about. As far as during construction, as with the site that's going on now, generally the parking that's adjacent to the construction site, we generally will allow them to use that for construction, for deliveries, for things like that. So for this one, that would be just a little section on 3rd Avenue, which we really wouldn't, that wouldn't be their main entrance. I mean, with this, because of just the geometry of the site and everything, their deliveries and everything will be mostly probably on Claremont, because that's their largest spot, and Railroad Avenue is really too small to have any big deliveries or anything. And plus that would actually, they'd have to block the street completely on there. So it probably will be similar to what's going on the current site. Generally, but now the parking in front of the businesses would not be, those would always stay open during the life of the project, and the ones that would be adjacent on Claremont that's in front of their property, those would be left. But we do not get an actual parking plan or traffic detour plan and all that. That doesn't come in until the building permit phase, and that goes to our traffic department to see, to go like that. This one, the adjacent project started off only taking the sidewalk and parking area. The last few couple months, I'm not really exactly sure when they started, but yeah, they have been closing the one side of the street with only one-way traffic. Again, until it actually gets to construction, they have to put in requests for every one of those, and we look at it at that time. But we don't have a plan that we're actually approving at this point.
Thank you. Is that it for the questions that you had?
Yes.
Okay. Questions of the Planning Commission? From the Planning Commission to either staff or the applicant?
I have a question for the applicant, through the chair,
Okay.
if this is the appropriate time. Relative to the plans that were presented at the study session, so at that time it was 23 units, and now it's 25. And at that time, was it also proposed 11% very low income? Or was
I believe
that
at that time I think we only had 2 units at that time. I don't remember. I think it was just 2 units at that time.
Okay. Can you just for the commission's edification, so there was a consistent preference communicated at the study session for a preference for less commercial, more residential or retail.
Right.
And so I'm sure that you considered that feedback in the decisions you make. Can you just talk about that?
Absolutely. So, there's 143 restaurants in downtown San Mateo. We have San Mateo as some of the best retail of any downtown. It gets very, very tough. I think Bay Meadows talked about this briefly. It gets very tough for retailers at this type of structure to make the economics work, bottom line, let alone in what I would call a secondary retail location to the main core. However, one of the reasons we did what we did at the third corner, that looks very retail, right? We have the outdoor seating area. Everything we did there was to mimic the retail environment that is on B Street. If you walk from B to this project, it doesn't feel that retail, right? But when you look from B and you see across to the corner, you'll get a sense that, oh, there's something over there that's worth going to look at. And so that's really our intent. A lot of the retail around the project currently is destination retail. So someone's been going to that restaurant forever, or there's an insurance agent who they know their customers and their customers know them. And so the traditional retail sort of that we see on B Street isn't really sustainable in this location.
Okay, it's economic.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't benefit Bay Meadows. It doesn't benefit us to have vacant space.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it kind of deactivates.
Because as the lady spoke earlier, is 35% occupancy right now
After
in Bay Meadows.
after 4 years,
With regard, so again, so thank you for clarifying that. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
The change design with regard to that adjacent wall. So
Yes.
it's mentioned in the staff report.
Yes.
That design modification that you're requesting to be incorporated in is saving $110,000
correct.
on the budget.
Correct.
Is there any, so my question would be the 110,000 in savings laid out in the staff report, is there any benefit of that or any change to the design or investment in the property or community from that, or is that just a reduction of your
Cost. So the elimination of those elements was really a pragmatic thing, right? It's like, hey, we're going to cover this up. Why are we going to put brick here that we then have to worry about it being a maintenance issue and a waterproofing issue? Once we build the second building, we don't want any water penetration. And so we want to make sure that that facade is flat and that it can't get disrupted. It's not easy to build two buildings right next to each other. And so one of the ways that we ensure that the buildings are suitable is by not putting things like that can get ripped off, like brick, during construction. As it relates to cost, I mean, we're contributing $165,000 to public works improvements. We're contributing $10,000 to, a speed sensor. I can go to, am I going the wrong way here? Yeah, hang on. Oh, was that at the beginning? Okay. Let me get back down. We're contributing a total of $6.5 million of fees to the city for various reasons and various entities. It has been a pleasure to work with the Central Neighborhood Association. We've had the opportunity to get to know them. They've gotten to know us. We've kind of understood, some of the things that they're really looking for. And so, we aren't unwilling to work with and give back. But, it's something that I think worth raising, that this is 10% of our total project cost is city fees. And the newest of these fees is the commercial linkage fee, which is $2.2 million. And that's, of course, a fee to help with the housing issues that we face. I think we're certainly carrying our fair share. The one thing that I think we should all be sensitive to is, should new development cover all the costs for everything that we do? But so as far as, does that answer your question from that perspective?
It does give perspective. It's just, it was specifically called out in the staff report.
Yeah.
And enumerated, so that's
Well,
why.
We wanted to be transparent with staff for a couple reasons. One is so the city could understand, what we're not doing. And let's say that we don't build the building. Well, what happens, right? I mean, what are we really talking about here? We're talking about $105,000. And if we don't do it, if we don't start construction quick enough, then we got to go back and do all that stuff to make sure that you're not left with something that you don't want to look at.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? No.
Through the chair, can we go back to that parking or the fee structure, please?
Of course.
So,
It's a slide I spend a lot of time looking at.
I'm sure. So the commercial linkage fee at $25 a square foot, and you've got 84,992 square feet. How come it's not 103,000 square feet?
Because there's currently commercial on the site, and so that square footage that's currently on the site gets deducted from the new.
Okay. And the parking in lieu fees, so is that the same thing? You're only showing 102 and there's actually going to be 107?
We will make sure and pay every penny of the parking in lieu fee that we are due. But yeah, as we design the structure, all of a sudden PG&E says, hey, we need to put a transformer down near your garage. And so we lose a stall and then we have to pay more. But it'll be somewhere in that range, and we'll work with staff to make sure we pay the appropriate amount.
Okay. So,
Can you speak into the mic?
I'm sorry about that. So I think there's a little bit of give and take on the project fees also, in the sense that if you kind of have if you're taking 107 parking stalls and if you charge them out at $54,000 a stall, which is what I think they're costing elsewhere in the city, versus the $25,000 which you'll pay to the city, there's about a $3 million savings to the project. Also, I see some give and take with the additional floor area space of over 4,000 square feet. It's kind of like granting free land, if you will, but it's appropriate because it will be going to the housing also. So I think there's other things that might, play into the project fee structure that I think should be addressed if we're going to talk about raw dollars and project fees. The housing on the third floor, the 25 units, and there's going to be 5 or 3 very low units. How is it picked? Which sizes are used?
So it has to be commensurate. So, for example, on 4th and Claremont, there was we have to submit it to the city, and the city basically says, okay, that looks about right. But so, for example, if we're doing 3 BMR units, maybe there's 1 1-bedroom and 2 studios, or 2 1-bedrooms and a studio. From our perspective, we are relatively agnostic. We just we're going to have the same nonprofit organization manage these 3 BMR units that's managing the BMR units next door. So we'll work with them to say, hey, because I don't recall what we did next door. I think we did 1 studio and 1 1-bedroom. And so a lot of times they'll tell us, right, we need more studios, or we need more 1-bedrooms. Because obviously there is a rent differential between those. And so if you're going for raw affordability, it matters.
Okay. So I believe during the study session, there was a question presented to you, Mike, about the impact of, or restrictions or limitations on what you were able to do on the residential side if we were not working within some of our height and size limitations. But I think your answer at that time was no, it wouldn't make any difference. Is that answer correctly quoted in the last presentation, or is there a difference if you had more leeway in height and density on this type of a scope as it pertains to housing?
It's a little bit of a loaded question. I know the city's working through this right now. Well, not a loaded question, but it's a expansive question. But I think there's no. So I think I think that's incorrect. I think, and this is, if I did speak incorrectly, then forgive me. But essentially, we bring up costs of parking, structure, office, et cetera, and whether or not these things make financial sense. The ideal scenario, let's start there, would be to have additional height so that we could put additional levels of residential. A building at this scale on residential is very difficult because you're building just 25 units. It'd be much easier to, things get easier as you have some economies of scale. That being said, apartments can't support the land and garage costs here for a developer like ours. For a nonprofit developer, that's what we're getting across the street. But if our project was to do more housing, it could really only be achieved by putting it on top of the existing housing, which would require more height. Now keep in mind, a residential level is 10 feet. So you could say, okay, I want 10 more feet so that I could do 2 levels of residential, or 20 more feet so I could do 3. All that, from our perspective, if we had the height, we would be proposing more residential.
Okay, so this is a little off key, but have you seen or heard of any conversations where there could be private and public partnerships where the residential components were built by the applicant or the developer and then sold or turned over to a nonprofit organization for them to manage and run?
So I haven't experienced any of those. I know that what we've done in other instances is helped those nonprofit organizations take the commercial linkage fees and actually buy a project. It's a 12-unit apartment building or a 25-unit apartment building, so that there's some direct linkage. So rather than giving the city fees, developers have actually donated projects or apartment buildings. And so that, I think, is great when it can work, because it gets you immediate housing stock as opposed to kind of going into a fund, which can take time to deploy. As far as selling the units on top of our building, or on top of this building, So I'm not a for sale housing a developer. I don't understand exactly what that would entail. And so, we haven't had any experience with that.
Okay. Couple other questions before we go to the comments, I think, at some point, is I believe the building, or I know the building on 3rd Street, which you're in the middle of completing, which does look like it's turned out to be a very attractive building, by the way. You decided not to use any natural gas in that building and go all electric for the request of this commission, based mostly on environmental concerns. Are you going to do the same thing on 4th?
Yes, on 3rd, the building we're talking about,
3rd.
yes, we are.
Okay. And a minor one that I don't want to forget, with residential units, it's the most difficult place to handle recycling. And a lot of people, different locations, they put in chutes for the apartments. A lot of times they'll only put in 2 chutes, and that really doesn't help. Will you be designing the project where there'll be chutes and 3 different chutes for recycling, composting, and waste?
So we have 2 chutes, one for recycling, one for garbage. The reason we don't have a 3rd chute is because, according to the garbage company, compost isn't really appropriate for a chute because of how dirty it is. And so what the residents would be provided from the garbage company is like an individual, I don't know if you've ever seen these for homes, but an individual little bin that you can keep in your kitchen or whatever. And we would just have to work with the tenants to provide a location where they can dispose of that, and then our janitorial staff will take care of it. But we have 2 chutes, one for trash, one for recycling, and then we'll have a process for compost.
Okay, so that's a little different than what I believe I've seen over the last couple of years, where some of the developments have gone with a 3-chute process. Some of the larger developments also on the residential side, so maybe their requirements have changed some.
Well, it's tough for us too as a 25 unit.
Right.
Because to grow those extra 2 units, we've gobbled up every square foot that we could find. And the chutes have to be able to deal with fire and other things, and so they're not just a tube.
Okay, thank you. That was it for now.
That's it? Okay. Helen?
My building has chute confusion, so it is very difficult, I will say. Composting was one of my questions too, so I'm glad to hear that that's still on the table, because that's missing in my building and I wish we did have it. I do have a question, and I don't know if Rendell can pull this up. It's a corner view of Railroad and 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah. So from what I can tell here, it looks like you are constructing some kind of a screen along there, which I think is a very good idea, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the screen.
Yeah, so it's conceptual in nature at this point, but it's intended to be public art. So we're trying to come up with something that has that creates that sort of emotion and that sort of reaction. And so this was our kind of first concept, and then we would try and work with some local artists to come up, with something that, and then, try and develop this even further. But the concept would be glass partitions, and exactly how they were colored, or whether they have tinting now where as you walk by they change color. So there's all sorts of things that we can work with to make it of greater interest. We want it to feel very dynamic. So as you walk by, something's happening there. And it also provides sound barrier from the train.
Perfect, that's what I wanted to know. Back to this parking issue. So your underground parking would be possibly used by the city as parking for downtown people visiting and whatever. So the report says closes at 8 a.m. on a weekend, 8 p.m. on a weekend. Is that still your plan?
No. So this garage will function just like the garage adjacent, and I like Rendell and tried to think, was it 11 p.m.? Was it midnight? I don't remember exactly when it was, but we all agreed it was a good time when we agreed to it. And so this garage will be identical. And the way that the parking agreement for the Fourth and Claremont building has worked is it essentially functions as a city garage during those hours. So if the city's charge, so we don't want to compete with the city's a garage necessarily. So if the city's charging, we'll charge what the city's charging, right? It will, for all intents and purposes, feel, look, and operate like a city garage during the hours that city folks are using it.
That's great. I think that was all I had left because my questions got answered earlier. Thank you.
Guess it's my turn. Let's. So we probably covered this in our study session, but I have forgotten. Is the parking for the residential bundled or unbundled?
It's unbundled. As part of the TDM program. We did better on this project, by the way. We were able to achieve an even higher percentage because we're a little closer to the train and some other amenities.
And the 16 tandem parking spaces, are they office or residential?
They're office because they're unsecured. The residential parking has to be secured. And so the plan there, we have we know our office tenants and they know each other and they want to park under their building, right? And so those that do drive will work with the tenants to make sure that the front stalls are assigned to certain individuals and the back stalls to others who either work different schedules, have different things like that to help them work. But we do anticipate a large portion of the employees taking public transit, because, for various reasons.
Okay. You had a graphic in your presentation. I think I can do it without, because I don't remember what the graphic looked like, but I made some notes. Could we have that image you just had, please?
Do you want the one that's zoomed out?
Let's start with this one. No.
Okay.
Well, you talked about you reduced the glass at the corner from 40 feet to 12 feet.
Correct.
I'm assuming you're talking about this measurement?
Correct.
Okay. And then you talked about enhanced brick detailing. Could you elaborate on that?
So there's various cornices and sills. So you can see the sill there of the.
Can't because.
Oh yeah, hang on, my
you
laser.
Dim the
Your
lights
green
a little,
one worked,
Ryan?
but mine didn't work.
Oh, you need a pointer?
Yeah, can I have your green one?
Yeah.
I might not give it back.
Yeah, it's the lights are too bright up here to see the screen
It looks
clearly.
a lot better on my computer screen.
Yeah, yeah, ours is better too.
So you have a sill here, you have this inlay element right here. I'm going to go to a couple other renderings if that's let me see if I can find. Same inlay and sill element here. All of these add depth, they add interest. We were fairly limited here, but we did a few interesting items on the top, this banding. We also incorporate some metal panel on the other facade. So all these things just add interest to the brick, make it look more authentic. One of the things that I'm really happy with the adjacent building is that the brick looks very natural because they're not pre-constructed panels. Each brick is laid by hand. And so although they're not, 3 inches thick like the old brick used to be, you do get a very natural looking hand-laid look. And it also, because they're individual pieces, they aren't all the same color necessarily. And so we've been happy with how that product has worked out on 4th and Claremont.
Okay. So can we revisit the unit sizes? Because you
Yes.
either spoke or there was a graphic and they were different than what I
520
pulled
to
out of the
650.
drawings.
Well, then I'll grab my architect's ear. But 520 to 650 are the various sizes.
Okay, I found some studios as low as 431 square feet. That's how they're labeled on the drawings.
Let me see. He's moving a lot of paper.
Yeah.
Let's go, what's your question regarding the square footage? And then while he's digging, maybe we can go to the next question. Is that too small? Or,
I just found it curious because of the, forget how many studios you have now, but 17 studios? They range in size from 431 square feet to 753 square feet. And your one bedrooms now, 8? 8 of those range from 570 to 892, and you have one that's 1,009 square feet. So there didn't seem to be a lot of consistency.
A rhyme or reason?
It's whatever seemed to fit into the
that's
space.
exactly right. So we really were just trying to fit as many as we could, and based upon their location on the roof, based upon where the air conditioning sits, et cetera, we just tried to get as many units as we could. And so I think, if I'm remembering right, the units that are closer to 4th tend to be a little bit bigger, and then we started to get constrained as they got to 3rd. And he's still working through the paper over there, but I think that's kind of how it shook up. Do you have? Can I see that?
It's on the sheet where you calculated the occupant load and the exiting plan.
So I believe the A units are the smaller units, is that correct? So do you want to talk, okay, so 5, 6.
So the A's are the studios,
Okay,
and
so
the
these
B's
inline ones
are
are
the
the
one bedrooms.
Do you have a plan that shows each unit and its square footage? Okay, so you've got that one.
It's A's
A1.
0.12.
Oh, got it, okay. So, I mean, Evan can talk a little bit about the architectural reason why that's small, why those, what is it, 5 units or smaller?
Well,
And then, there's one unit
so
in the back.
that's not so important as the
Oh.
follow-up question, which goes back to what John brought up, is how do you determine which one become the very low unit?
Income.
Very low income units.
Again, we'll work with city staff, and the city has input on this. So
let me just explain how this works for every BMR unit that's approved by the city of San Mateo. There's an agreement that's executed with Sandy Council and the Housing Division. What they will take a look at is the proportion of the units, the location of the units, and then designate those. So that would occur after, if the project gets approved, it would happen after the project gets approved. It would have to be a representative sample. Sometimes the math doesn't equal out exactly that way to divide it up. So it would be commensurate with the size and the types of units that are provided in the market rate project. So that is an agreement that needs to be executed with the Housing Division. Again, many of you have met Sandy Council. Her office engages with every single residential developer that has a BMR on site, not only to choose the units, but to also manage the units to make sure people, if they start making more money than is otherwise the case for BMR units, monitoring that for the for sale projects, ensuring that those units continually be maintained for below market rate units. So the unit mix, the unit location is not up to the applicant. That's something that's negotiated straight with the Housing Division.
Okay. And then one final question. Rendell, do you have the 4th floor plan available? Not this one. This one's... And I lost my pointer. Okay. Can I borrow my pointer back, please? Yes, thank you. Thank you. So can you talk about this space here?
Yeah, that's the open air courtyard for those units. And so that area will be actually awesome. But we haven't gotten to that point with city staff to present that. But as part of our construction documents, we've started to work on the design of that area, and it'll have potted plants, benches, grill, fire pit, things like that, assuming they meet fire code, right? And so that'll be a nice amenity space, rich with greenscape. You know, we can't use too much water because we're trying to be LEED, but that's the intent of that area is to be an outdoor amenity space for those occupants.
And it is open to the sky,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So you're going to have to deal with rainwater.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, just like an exterior balcony.
Yeah.
We'll have to have drains and such.
So we have someone here from DJ Powers, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes? A couple of the questions that came from the public if you want to come to the microphone, please. Some of the public speakers expressed concern about noise mitigation or possible mitigation measures and vibration. You want to
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
tell us how we're going to handle that?
Members of the commission, my name is Mike Campbell. I'm with David Powers and Associates. We prepared the initial study. The initial study did identify construction noise and vibration as potentially significant impacts, and also listed the mitigation measures that would be included in the project that would reduce the levels to less than significant. So I can go through them real quickly. Just to clarify, construction noise mitigation measure NOI-1.2. The project applicant would be required to incorporate the following mitigation measures into the proposed project to minimize the impact of construction noise on existing sensitive receptors. And then there's a bullet list of items that talk about construction activities shall be limited to the hours between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, Saturdays between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., and Sundays and holidays between 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. in accordance with the city's Muni Code, unless permission is granted with a development permit or other planning approval. So we have construction hours. We have the use of concrete saw is limited to minimum of 50 feet from shared property lines as feasible. The requirement that equipment with combustion engine-driven equipment have intake and exhaust mufflers that are in good condition and appropriate for the equipment. Restricting unnecessary idling of internal combustion engines is prohibited. Locating stationary noise generating equipment such as air compressors, power generators, or as far as possible from sensitive receptors. Utilizing quiet air compressors and other stationary noise sources where the technology exists. Proposing a temporary noise control barrier blanket if necessary along building facades facing the construction sites. Noise control from construction workers' radios. The contractor shall prepare a detailed construction plan identifying the schedule for major noise generating construction activities. And last but not least, and probably the most important, designation of a disturbance coordinator who would be responsible for responding to any complaints about construction noise. The disturbance coordinator will determine the cause of the noise equipment and will require that reasonable measures be implemented to correct the problem. Part of this condition is that they conspicuously post a telephone number for the disturbance coordinator at the construction site and include in it the notice sent to neighbors regarding the construction schedule. So they make available a contact person that can be directly contacted with complaints. And this, by the way, as outlined in the project's mitigation monitoring and reporting program, it gives a time frame for the implementation. In this case, it's prior to and during construction activities on the site. It identifies the responsibility for implementation of these measures, which is the Community Development Department's building division, and also provides who is responsible for oversight of the implementation. In this case, the building department as well. We also identified on the vibration issue, the project would be required to incorporate the following mitigation measures to reduce vibration impacts on adjoining structures to the north and south of the project site to a less than significant level. And the bullet items there are prohibiting impact of or vibratory pile driving, drilled piles, which cause lower vibration levels than impacted piles, where geological conditions permit their use. So wherever that's feasible, there wouldn't be any pile driving allowed. List of all heavy equipment to be used for the project, known to produce high vibration. Things like jackhammers, hoe rams, vibratory compaction devices, tracked vehicles, things like that. A list of those things shall be submitted to the city by the contractor, and the list shall be used to identify equipment and activities that would potentially generate substantial vibration, to define the level of effort required for continuous vibration monitoring. So it does allow for a monitoring process. Next one is a construction vibration monitoring plan shall be implemented to document conditions at all structures located within 25 feet of the proposed construction prior to, during, and after vibration generating construction activities. All planned tasks shall be undertaken under the direction of a licensed professional structural engineer in the state of California and be in accordance with industry accepted standard methods. The construction vibration monitoring plan should be implemented to include the following tasks, and then it goes on to identify the specific tasks to be included in that plan. The time frame for implementation for these measures is prior to and during construction activities on the site. The responsibility for implementation is the project applicant, and the oversight of those implementation measures falls with the Community Development Department's Planning Division. So those are the construction noise mitigation that we identified to, as I said, reduce levels to less than significant. And those will be included in the project and enforceable by the city.
Thank you.
Other
Any
questions?
other questions of this consultant? No? Okay, thank you. Questions or, yeah,
I have a couple questions
questions.
through the chair.
Yes.
Both for the applicant, staff, and Public Works. I'll do the easy one with Public Works first. I understand that there's been some ongoing issues with storm runoff and drains on on projects in the city recently that have taken quite a while to be addressed on site. What is Public Works standard procedure when complaints come in or concerns come in about specifically storm drains and not being protected properly?
Yeah, either the Public Works inspector or we have environmental compliance inspectors will go out to the site, see what's there, and if there's a problem, there's different levels. We have an action plan in which it can be clean up right now. They come back later in the afternoon, it's taken care of, and that's it. If it's worse than that or something that they can't do, then they're given a notice of violation, which they'll it'll be written how long they have to fix it, depending on, the severity and what's going on with that. And then they come back, they follow up, see if it's done. And again, it can elevate from that. I don't think we've had any that recently that have elevated beyond that. And then that gets reported in the annual stormwater report to the state if there's been violations.
Okay. And it's not all that uncommon in a built-out area to be working in a situation where you have zero laydown for your construction materials or activities. I have been pretty surprised at what's occurred on the project on 4th and the closure of Claremont for the length of time and what's sitting there. I don't drive that area as part of my commute, but I would think that there's got to be better solutions for using the public right-of-way than how we are currently doing it.
Yeah, I agree. If, again, it's not something that I've been involved with. I haven't been involved with that project.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, normally the construction inspectors are usually telling them that they cannot, when you say lay down areas. So as I said before, generally we give them the sidewalk and maybe the parking strip in areas in which, but that's supposed to be only used during, construction hours to lay down, pick up, get out, but not for permanent storage of materials.
Yeah.
And, certainly not things like, construction trailers or anything like that. None of that should be in the public right away. It's all supposed to be off-site. Again, if that wasn't the case there, it should have been. We'll try better on this one. But yeah, and certainly I'll talk to the construction department, our inspectors tomorrow and see what's going on and stuff. But yeah, again, the road closures, I just found out about that today, and I was going out there, and because Chair Whitaker had mentioned it on the Friday meeting, and so I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that they were closing lanes, so I checked out, and it does seem like that was allowed a little bit more than we normally would, and so, because usually that would be something, for, a week or something you're doing, there's some event that you need to take it.
Sure.
And again, they are only taking it during construction hours, but still, it does seem like it was an excessive amount of time. So we would look at that, and so next time be a little more vigilant, probably.
Sure, thank you. I needed to let everybody know that I have talked with the applicant a couple of times on the phone prior to this meeting, so I know we're supposed to disclose that, and I had forgotten. Ron, is this decision final here at the Planning Commission, or does it go to City Council?
Final with the commission unless appealed.
Okay, thanks. So there isn't a requirement for any commercial, obviously, it's not a requirement in this location.
It is not within the required retail frontage area.
Okay. And I understand the concerns with downtown parking and trying to alleviate some of that with shared parking during specific hours that the building is going to do. If it turns out that the commercial parking is underutilized, would there be options to use some of that for commercial parking or for
retail parking?
For retail?
So, certainly as we go throughout, the next 50 years and we see who's still driving and who's riding in Uber helicopters, the parking garage is a resource. And there's no incentive for us to, not work with the city to provide that resource to the, and that's, I think we're one of the only developers who's built in downtown who's voluntarily, pushed their garage to be open to the general public. So, if the years go by and, no one's using that parking structure, then absolutely we would approach the city and say, hey, it's available. Now, will that be part of this approval? No.
Okay.
You know, I would just say that for both Windy Hill projects, the one under construction plus the one before you tonight, as well as the Essex project, all of those have a condition that talk about utilization of quote-unquote private parking for public purposes after business hours. And I think that's something that Sue Ellen and the Public Works Department is looking at, strategizing the use of parking as a parking space rather than, this is a public space, that's a private space. There are a pool of parking spaces that may have non-conflicting hours of operation. So I would agree with the applicant. Who knows in 10 years even what the landscape may be at that time. Hopefully the city's projects at the former redevelopment sites has been constructed with additional public parking. So looking at all these resources in total, plus what might happen with technology and people's travel habits, you know, who knows what the utilization of the parking garage may be in 5-10 years. But certainly it's in line with, let's take a look at the totality of parking in downtown rather than treating exclusively public and private, because there are some economies of scale and some savings that means we don't have to construct as much parking as would otherwise be necessary.
Thank you. So, Mike, this will come back to you, but I'll jump to the staff first. I do know in the environmental report that the toxic air contaminants, or better known as TACs, was addressed. I believe it was addressed as it pertained to construction activities only. Is that something that you're familiar with, or?
It's probably best if the David J. Powers representative responded to that.
Pardon me?
Probably be best if Mike Campbell from David J. Powers responded.
Okay, so
As it pertains to them.
Okay, that's all that I found in the packet was it was for construction activities. If I'm incorrect on that, somebody can tell me, but.
Yeah, that's correct. The TACs are reviewed as part of the construction activities. It's you know, the primary pollutant of concern is the fine dust, the PM 2.5, which is not something that happens during operational aspects of the project. It's really a construction issue.
Okay, perfect. So I'm sorry, what is your name, sir?
Mike Campbell with David
Mike,
Powers and
nice to meet
Associates.
you, Mike. So as it came up on with the project on 4th Street, I was concerned with the TACs that are associated with the train, diesel, and also with the brake components that fry off of the brake from the trains. And I do know, or I believe, when you are bringing receptors close to large freeways or rail lines, that it is a requirement to have guidelines and research into the amount of TACs that are generated there. That is what I'm reading from the TAC emissions from the Air Quality Board. And what I had asked last time was that if the property owner would be amendable not to using leaf blowers at his property to eliminate some of the disturbance of these hazardous materials from becoming airborne. So Mike, again, I would like to see if you would be amendable to not having leaf blowers on your property.
So to the extent that, you know, we're maintaining the exterior sidewalk areas of the building, we're willing to commit to not use electric or gas-powered leaf blowers on, on the exterior street level of the building. Yes.
Okay. So I have one last question, I believe, of you, and I feel compelled to ask it because I know I will be questioned on this by people who are interested in housing. I appreciate your efforts in bringing any housing to San Mateo. I don't know if this is the exact housing market that we need to address, but it's still some housing. It doesn't really offset the 100,000 square feet in office build, but it's better than what we've seen in the past. would you be willing to consider with your negotiations with the city to add one more low-cost unit to the project, and or at least add one 2-bedroom low-cost unit?
So, when we came before the Planning Commission prior, the direction really was maximum number of units, served the most number of people. I was happy to see that the project across the street from us will obviously be providing, assuming it moves forward, which it looks pretty positive, a tremendous amount of housing for or below market rate housing, including multiple bedroom units. And so certainly if we were to bring in, if the direction from this body is we would like to see bigger units, then we would certainly implement that in, our next project, assuming, you still like us. But as far as this project's concerned, things are pretty well. As far as the residential layout, we expended all of our efforts in getting maximum number of units. And so at this point, this residential plan is fixed.
Okay, that answers the 2-bedroom unit. How about one more low-cost unit in the mix?
We're already exceeding what San Mateo asks for. And so at this time, no, we're not willing to commit to more below market rate units with this project.
Okay, thank you. My questions?
Okay.
I just do want to call attention to the commission that, without getting into all the details of the court case, BIA versus Bay Area Quality Management District, on pages 40 and 41 of the initial study, there was an analysis of toxic air contaminants from the railroad and other sources, given the sensitive receptors that would be residential at this site.
Thank you.
Follow-up questions? No? Want to move on to comments? Okay. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
You'll start. Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Thank you, Rendell, Mr. Field, applicant. I am, a couple things I wanted to comment on from this. This is one of the first study sessions I had on the Planning Commission. So I do think it's a very, a great project, a great addition to that area. There's different viewpoints on the parking. There are some people who have voiced that it feels underparked and some that feel it feels overparked. My view with the square footage of office space and the 25 residential units is it feels appropriately parked. And so I appreciate the 105 parking spaces being carved out for CPID, parking in lieu. I think that's, to me, that makes sense when I look at all of this. And I also appreciate the increase from 2 units of very low income units to 3 units. I think that's of great benefit to the community. I wish, just like Commissioner Ebner, it was 4 units or more, but I also appreciate the economics that go into a project of this size. With regard to the changes in design from the study session, they are all positive in my view. The reduced glass especially, I appreciate, and also I really like the conceptual public art that is laid out in the drawings that you mentioned. I know it's conceptual, but it was actually very, that looked great to me as a public benefit. The TDM plan and the 37% trip reduction is also a great positive for this project and highlights the benefits of transportation-oriented development. I appreciate the Public Works comment around extending the permitted parking for the neighborhoods and their petition process to do that. And so I would expect that the neighborhood will be pursuing that as this project continues. In reviewing the findings for approval, I do agree with them. there are two items that I wanted to bring up as possible conditions for my fellow commissioners to consider. One of them we discussed at the Friday meeting, which was around, and I don't know, Rendell, if you've had any further discussion or review on this, but it was around the concept of something and the conditions around the ground floor commercial window facing. Is there something to ensure that it's an attractive use, or at least consistent with the designs that are in the application? And the other item that I'd like, if it's appropriate, for my fellow commissioners to consider is around the concept of the protections for the small businesses that are on 3rd Street. Several of them have come forth and written letters, both at the study session for this application, and several have come forward and actually spoken in this meeting. And I do worry about the impact of the substantial construction activity and the impact that will have on the limited 3rd Avenue parking that is available for these small businesses. And I wonder if it might be appropriate to consider some kind of prescriptive condition around monitored parking to ensure that just the commercial, individuals patronizing those businesses are able to use those. Maybe that's already contemplated, or maybe it's too early because there needs to be more formal traffic planning, but that's just something I wanted to bring up as a possible condition to consider. But again, as far as this project goes, I'm very supportive, and I think it's a very, very strong application, and I thank you.
Thank you. Ellen?
This might have been my longest packet ever. So I think I was born in the wrong century as far as architecture goes. And over this weekend, I did the self-guided tour of the Downtown Historic District, which a lot is on 3rd Avenue. And I really appreciate that. That's what I like. That's what I look for. And I think of the downtown area as a zone. And I like to see architecture that kind of reflects the zone that it's in. That said, there are parts of our city that have very modern buildings, and I think they look great because they're sort of all together and they work together in a zone. So I looked at this project with historic style in mind. One thing I found when I was going through the packet was that there was one drawing of the entire facade of the 3rd Avenue side. One drawing. And all the others capitalize on Claremont and Railroad Avenue, which I like. I like the way they look. And it's a little too much aluminum for me. I would like to see less aluminum, less glass, but okay. But when I look at the 3rd Avenue facade, I see, can we put that up? A301. When I look at that, compared to the Claremont and the Railroad side, it looks very flat to me. The other facades, there's a lot going on. This looks like a flat side here and windows here, and then a garage in the middle. And when I was thinking about it in regards to the central neighborhood and the downtown historic district, and whether or not that facade gave a transition between those two, that was my concern, was that I didn't see a transition on that facade. So that concerns me because it is going to be a very remarkable building. And I would like it to be more transitional to our historic downtown and be a gateway. My next concern deals with the circulation issue and having the garage on 3rd Avenue. And I've talked to Rendell today for a long time about the fact that the 4th Avenue building is on, the garage entry is on Claremont, and that it doesn't make sense to have 2 entries on the same street, that this will have a median down the middle that'll help manage people turning across traffic. So I was glad to hear about the median. One thing that really concerns me is that I've seen it happen downtown already, where there's a stop sign on the east side of the tracks and the traffic backs up across the tracks. And people are using their phone while they're sitting waiting for people to go. And heaven forbid anything happens when they're waiting up 3rd Avenue. And it could be completely fine with the way it works, or it could be an issue, but that is a concern for me, that the entry is on 3rd. I am concerned, and I think it's been brought up already, about the half parking place per unit, because I think it's going to impact the neighborhoods, because that's where the people are going to have to park if they have cars. And maybe I'll be completely proved wrong and people will only use transit, and that would be great. But if they don't, then that's a concern to only have half a parking place per unit. If there was an opportunity for them to use the commercial parking in the evenings or something like that, I think that would be a great solution and a great compromise until such time as cars disappear. And it could be sooner rather than later. I think John brought up having larger units. I can understand with 25 units that 1-bedroom and studios fit in that better, and I get that. But if you do more, it'd be great to have 2- and 3-bedroom units in your next development. I really like all the pedestrian improvements you've done. That's really huge, and I really like what you've done along the corner of Railroad and 3rd. I love the use of the brick. I think that works well with the remaining businesses on 3rd. It's a nice transition there. But I am concerned about the 3rd Street facade. And I would like to request, if we could, to separate A, B, and C for voting purposes. And that's all.
Thank you. Back to John.
Through the chair. I generally like the project. I think that possibly 3rd Street is a little bit more difficult to manage architecturally because of these 3 remaining retail spaces there. I think that's quite a challenge to get it right. It does not flow, and it is not as attractive as Claremont. I think what you've done on Claremont Street shows the neighborhood a lot of respect. It's not like, oh, this is the wrong side of the building and we don't care. There's definitely been some good effort put into that, and I really appreciate that. I would not know how to change the 3rd Street side. I think there's a lot going on there, and it's a difficult task. I think that putting the public space on that corner has its positives and its negatives. Quite frankly, I'm not so sure that I would want to sit there and have my cup of coffee, but maybe it will work long term. But that is one of the reasons why I wanted to discuss it being so close to the railroad tracks and people trying to enjoy some free time and not have to deal with pollutants in the air in the general vicinity. Parking's going to be a debate forever in this city because we are built out. I just look at 64,000 square feet for parking, which is 4 times more than the 15,000 square feet for humans for residences. And the math is difficult for me to think that we have to spend so much time and energy housing our cars in proportion to housing our people. But that's an ongoing debate that will continue for quite a long time. I have concerns with the circulation only in the sense that I think as you go east on 3rd, and it's 1 lane there, I believe, that left-hand turn can mess everything up behind you, and it's a short block. So I really think that's going to need to be monitored and looked at, because if that left is going to be sitting there between 3 and 5 in the afternoon or 3 and 6, and you've got train traffic, I think it could be a dangerous situation. I like the idea a lot about right out of that. I think it's a great solution. As it concerns with the mitigated negative deck, thank you, Ron, for pointing out the TACs that were looked at, and thank you very much, Michael, for being the first applicant in the history of San Mateo to alleviate leaf blowers from their property. I like the building. I like the mix. I think it's a great give and take for the developer and the city. The developer gets their good office space and the city gets some more housing. I hope that will continue to develop where we can have some public-private partnerships where the housing can be used for multiple applicants to be able to use, multiple residents to be used. I like the architectural changes on this. I think that the building's quality next door on 4th is starting to come together and look like a nice project. And I have to believe that, that this one will be a good neighbor to it. I am concerned with changing all of these neighborhoods from low-lying industrial to Class A office buildings. I think at some point the city's going to have to think about what type of warehousing districts that they are willing to protect, because I don't want to see our city turn into housing and office space only. We do need the services. We have to be cognizant of that. This is another location where we're losing 3 or 4 low-performing buildings, but we don't get to replace them elsewhere either. So I think there needs to be a discussion on where this goes. I see this model happening quite a bit, and it is progress, but we're also losing some of our abilities to do our day-to-day services for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick question for staff. On page 3 of the findings for approval, number 4, the tentative parcel map, item number 2, I think that's in error, inclusion, because it talks about demolition of the existing potentially eligible historic structures. So I think that's left over from the earlier.
I think I'll defer to Rendell, but I think that's a clerical error. I think that's a holdover from the prior approval.
Okay. I mean, the first part of the sentence is okay. It's just when it starts talking about all potential environmental impacts are less than significant except the demolition.
That's correct.
Okay. So I want to thank Commissioner Mallory for suggesting that we divide the vote into the 3 items, because I was also going to do that. So that's 2 of us that are in agreement on that. And thank you for all the commissioners of your very thoughtful comments. I may or may not agree with all of them, but it shows that you've taken the time to look at the project in detail. I still have concerns with the street and sidewalk closures during construction. And I know the traffic mitigation plan is further down the road, but having seen what's happening at the Windy Hill project on 4th Avenue under construction, it makes me nervous. And let's see, is Third Avenue in front of this parcel 1 or 2 lanes? It's 1 currently.
It's 1 eastbound in front of the
Concerned about the other direction. It is 2.
The other direction is 2, yeah. Here we go.
Okay. Because the issue I saw with the closures on 4th, well, no, okay, so.
If I can just make one observation,
Okay.
because I know there's been a lot of concern. So the interesting thing about this project is the reason 4th has experienced closure is because that's our longest facade. On this project, and this goes to a lot of your comments as well, 3rd is a very small facade for us. And so almost 90% of our time with the architectural consultant was on that facade because it was so difficult. It's so small. And that's why you saw us pull back off the retail building and put windows in and put metal panel and really try and dress up as opposed to just doing what we did on the last project where we did brick veneer on the blank wall.
Mm-hmm.
Because that facade is so short, it's difficult to create the depth in the architecture. Now, the architectural consultant felt like we really
But
achieved that.
we're talking about traffic now.
Oh,
Okay.
so as it relates to traffic then,
Yes.
that facade is so short that it's not going to experience the same sort of closures that 4th did because we don't have that much area that we need to construct, if that makes sense. So most of the construction activity will come from Claremont. Railroad's very difficult, and this is something that you may not be aware of. We are not permitted to close Railroad because of the police department, because they have to have access. That's their shortcut for dispatch. So although it does appear that, these are 0 lot line buildings, and we have to construct them some way. And so we really do work with Public Works to make sure that we're disrupting things as minimally as possible. But the challenge is a whole facade of our building, which we can't close that street.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes it kind of tough, especially once we start pouring sidewalks and curb and gutter and stuff like that. But anyway, did that answer your question, or did I go on too long?
It helped.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then along with that, it's my understanding it's a center median barrier that's proposed for 3rd. And that will prevent left turn lanes into the garage parking as well as left turn lanes out.
Correct. It would, right, so you would enter on, you're basically staying on eastbound 3rd.
Mhm.
So you enter a right-hand turn from the eastbound lane, and then you'd exit the same way.
Mhm.
But you got to remember that the garages are connected. So, I mean, especially the office workers that are in the garage all the time, they will quickly learn if they want to go westbound that they exit the Claremont, and then they would take a left off of Claremont, and then they'd be able to go. They'd come to the intersection and be able to go whatever direction on 3rd or go straight on Claremont. So, I mean, I think like you say, if it's difficult to turn left on, at 3rd and Claremont, they'll quickly know to come out on Claremont, the Claremont driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's solved one problem, which is back up along 3rd, coming into town, waiting for cars trying to turn left into the garage.
Correct.
But I think it's also created a different problem by only allowing right turns in and out.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, they'll just,
Yeah.
they'll have, I mean, if you want to go westbound on 3rd, you should leave the Claremont driveway.
But the solution I haven't heard is because the 2 parking garages are connected underground, why couldn't we simply have one entry and exit on Claremont? But, I mean, I don't want an answer, but that's sort of floating around in my brain.
There are issues with the fact that they are 2 different properties, so you'd be creating a garage with no exit to the street, to a street, because their exit would be to the neighboring property. And so then you'd have to create some sort of easements, driveway access easements and things like that. With the shared, they can just have an agreement. But if you actually shut it off, you'd have to have a formal, a formal easement.
And then also carry over from our study session, I'm still concerned with the location of your outdoor space at the corner of Railroad and 3rd. Similar to your 4th Avenue project in terms of the noise and the dust created by the adjacency to the railroads. Also, we talked a lot about this, both at your previous project and the study session for this one, about retail at the ground floor, which is something you didn't incorporate into the 4th Avenue building, and it looks like you're not going to at this one. But if I'm remembering correctly, we've talked about this location, this building, as a connector and or a transition between the central neighborhood residential and the downtown. And as it is proposed now, anyone who's walking from the central neighborhood, there's no reason to engage with this building. And they're just going to go by and go downtown and do their business. And if there was some retail in your building, there would be a destination, a reason for the people that live in the central neighborhood to come to your building and to use it. And the other issue is when you don't have active retail spaces on the ground floor, quite often office spaces put blinds up and other things that in effect create a wall for the pedestrian walking down the sidewalk, which is not very pedestrian friendly. So the revised elevations, I actually prefer the earlier ones. I think part of it is how they printed in our packets, because I could tell looking at the new elevations on the screen versus the printed on paper, there's a difference in how the different materials and colors are reading. The one exception is the railroad elevation. I think that one has improved over what we saw earlier. The other two, the Claremont side and the 3rd Avenue, I prefer the earlier version. In terms of the color palette, I think that the earlier version, the colors were cleaner and crisper and more lively. And I look at the proposed elevations tonight, and they just read dark to me. There's just too much dark coloration. In terms of materials, it appears as if you've added more brick to the current design, which I'm not a big fan of. I know certain people really like brick, but I don't, at least not modern brick. In terms of massing, I think the earlier elevations are cleaner, and that the ones presented tonight, they're kind of busy, and there's too many different layers that I'm reading in terms of shapes, colors, materials, and whether they're recessed or pulled forward. And then I think the windows in the current design, the mullions are a little heavy. And again, I don't know if that's how they were rendered, whether the projection is the same and the dimensions are the same, but they've been rendered with a heavier shadow. I mean, it could be as simple as that, but it's reading less human scale and more beefy. And this, I don't usually disagree with Larry Cannon, our design consultant, but I'm going to tonight. I mean, he's satisfied with the improvements that have been made based on earlier comments, but I'm still finding that the two buildings, the one under construction and this one side by side, are too similar. And I know you've tried to differentiate them with color and materials, but I think it's going to read as one building, a super block-sized building, and I'm concerned with that. So I'm not going to be able to make the findings for the site plan and architectural review for the reasons it's part one. The structure, site plan, and landscaping are in scale and harmonious with the character of the neighborhood. And then it lists, I think, 5 bullet points, 3 of which I don't think you've met. And then item 3, the development will not impair the desirability of investment or occupation in the vicinity and otherwise in the best interests of the public health, safety, or welfare. Because, and the primary reason for not being able to agree with that is the existing buildings that are going to have to live through the construction and the new building. And I think it's important that they be maintained and remain healthy and vibrant. One final thing, I just happened to be in that area Friday night and saw the north wall of the building that's under construction. And it's a tall, long, flat gray wall right now. I suspect it's the scratch coat that's up there. I would like, if we could add a condition of approval that, because we don't know when this building tonight, the new one, is going to be up there. But I would like to see a temporary piece of art, such as a mural on that large blank wall, until what time that the building that we're looking at tonight is constructed, and we'll hide that wall. You look puzzled. No?
guess, what is the gap? What is the timeline between, like, how long will that wall be empty? That would be my question on that.
If the project were to be approved, we would start construction essentially immediately. So that construction, scaffolding, equipment, fences, all would come on site once we got through the appropriate processes with the city and public works. So my assumption is we would have that wall nearly covered before the art committee could approve a mural.
Have you submitted for a building permit yet?
What's that?
Have you submitted for a building permit?
No, we certainly can't until the project's approved. And if it's not approved, or if it's, you know, we can't submit for a building permit until it's approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Having gone through that process for a very small project, I know it can be quite lengthy. So,
Okay.
yep. No. Just an idea. Driving around somewhere over the weekend, I saw a large blank wall that had a very simple, bright, colorful mural on it. And I thought, well, that's at least interesting to look at.
Well, I kind of think that the whole block is in transition. I don't know, I kind of hate to spend the money on something that's going to be short term. I'd rather just have it be blank and have the, you know, whatever is constructed next to it, rather than the time and the money to paint the mural and then have the mural covered up.
Well, it doesn't have to be painted. You know, they could use the technology they use on billboards, where they have a plastic wrap that goes up. Or a projector with images at night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any other final comments? No? So Ellen and I are in favor of splitting the vote into 3. Is this okay with the 2 remaining commissioners?
I'm fine with that.
You're fine?
Sure.
Okay. So who would like to make the first motion?
I'll make one.
Okay.
I move to adopt the mitigated negative declaration as adequate to assess the environmental impacts of the project based on the findings for approval in attachment 1.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Looking for a motion for Part B?
Can we do Part C?
You want to do Part C? Okay.
Through the chair, do we want to have a discussion about possible, it sounds like there are 3 different suggested conditions for approval that were brought up at various times, so what would be
Yeah,
the
because if they
appropriate
don't do
timing
B, there's no sense in doing C.
to bring those in?
So let's
So
recap what they are.
From staff's perspective, we would recommend doing B first, because if the vote is no for the SPAR,
C is superfluous.
it wouldn't make sense to allow the improvements not to be made to the blank wall in the neighboring building.
Okay.
But would it slow construction down on the 4th Avenue building?
As approved, the 4th Avenue building is supposed to have improvements made on the wall that's adjacent to this new project. And so that would remain in effect. And so what was on the agenda tonight was to change those conditions to say that they don't have to do the decorative
Right.
embellishments.
Right.
Right.
But why would we not be able to approve that as a completely separate item?
Because the building, if you don't approve the building in B, then there's nothing to cover up that wall. So why would you then
C is dependent.
approve
C is
C?
dependent on B. That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
I might not be done with my discussion on B.
Okay. Go ahead.
I would like to ask the applicant, can I do that?
Sure.
Honest answer. Are you going to look into the facade on Third, and are you going to change it?
We, when in working with Larry Cannon and staff, one of the things I mentioned is the vast majority of our time was working on that facade. And also with the central neighborhood. Most of the comments from, you'll notice that tonight you heard a support letter from the central neighborhood. I don't know how many of those you've heard. We worked really hard. It's a really difficult facade to design because of how small it is relative to the size of the overall project. So I'm willing to do whatever you want. I will make that facade look whatever you would like it to look like. I don't have, and that's what we thought we had done through Larry Cannon and staff's efforts. So, we don't know what to do because we thought we had done that. We had made the changes that the community, Larry Cannon, staff really tried to do everything that we thought we were being directed to do. And in fact, I think Larry Cannon's letter, this is our third project. This is the first letter of support, really, complete support that I've ever gotten from Larry Cannon. And I think the reason for that is because he saw how hard we worked on that facade to really look at every little detail to see if we could make it better, from adding windows, pulling it back, adding shades because the alternative is a huge blank wall above the retail building, and that is obviously unacceptable. And so because of fire code, we can only put so much glazing on that wall once we pull it back 3 feet. And so we did the maximum amount of glazing. We added all sorts of bricks and metals and other material. And then on the main lobby element, we were, every section of that design, we worked through multiple iterations with staff and Larry, every section. So it's not like we're just going to change the corner. Every section we looked at to try and respond to feedback and also to make it the best it could possibly be. I don't know if that answers your question, but we would do, certainly if there are specific items or guidance, things that like this would make it work for me, then we would make those changes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mike, you were talking about the possible additions or changes, conditions of approval. What?
Yeah, so Rendell, at the Friday meeting, we talked about the concept of, which I think has been mentioned a couple times, of doing, having something that's prescriptive so you can't, wall off those windowed areas, or conversely, have just like a bunch of boxes stacked up right against the window or something, again, as a consideration for the pedestrian walkway along Claremont 3rd.
Yeah, so after our Friday meeting, staff did prepare a draft condition of approval with that feedback, and so we have that for the commission to consider.
Would this cover like stacked boxes or something like that? Is this definition, would that cover that? Because I think that was one of the specific concerns that we talked about at the Friday meeting.
The condition could be modified further, but it does indicate that the windows along the ground floor shall be kept free of
other window coverings. So I guess that could possibly
I
be.
mean, if the commission's concerned about the stacked boxes, I recommend adding stacked boxes before the phrase "or other window coverings."
I would support that wording if the other commissioners would, are open to that.
So, through the chair.
Could we just say storage? Would that cover it?
Yes.
So
Some kind of
this
furniture.
is saying that we do not want blinds or tinting on the lower windows? Or we do want tinting and blinds?
Through the chair, it does say by keeping windows free of blinds, opaque tinting.
Okay.
That's going to be bad.
Normally see opaque tinting as a positive for clutter.
Yeah. So the Friday meeting, my discussion, I brought it up specifically as a concern about clutter along that. So I think from a proposed condition of approval, that's what I was looking to avoid. As Commissioner Ebenezer is mentioning, I would think opaque tinting tinting might be a way to address that.
Well, what I've seen used is maybe a band of some type of glazing tint 3 or 4 feet off of the ground, and then you still have the natural light above that. But there's a variety of ways to alleviate the visual impact of an interior office. And
Railroad Avenue is going to have some bright light in the afternoon if there's no way to cut that.
I think this is specific just to Claremont with the pedestrian walkway.
But you're still going to be able to see it on the railroad side, right?
Well, there's a difference between opaque tinting and tinting. What I was trying to avoid was there's some buildings in the periphery of the downtown where it's white, or actually it's the same color as this screen here, and it's solid. You can't see through it at all. And it has the effect of reading like a solid wall. So it's not the tinting I'm opposed to.
Yeah.
It's the percentage of it.
So
Density.
to bring it back again, so the reason I brought this up as a consideration for the in the Friday meeting was, for example, when I've walked along the new commercial space at that Station Park Green, the new offices there, and the windows there are clear. And when you look into the buildings, there's a workout room, there's open kitchen space. I mean, it's all appealing from a pedestrian standpoint. Then there are some buildings, conversely, like when you're walking, like let's say in the South Market area, and you're walking along in San Francisco, and there's quite a bit of street-facing commercial space there, and there's just desks with boxes stacked up and clutter and blocking the windows. And so I guess I was trying to bring it up again as something to consider to what could be a condition, if it's even necessary, to keep that as an appealing view for the pedestrians. I had not considered blocking. I had considered blocking the windows or tinting them or darkening them. That was not something that I was thinking about.
Through the chair, I think having conditions of approval on it may be appropriate. What I have experienced is that more often than not, the building owners have rules and regulations in their guidelines on what can or cannot happen because they're trying to make sure that their property looks appropriate also.
Which I actually would not. I mean, I don't feel very strongly about this proposed condition of approval. It was more a matter of discussion for consideration around pedestrian appeal.
Okay.
But I had not contemplated that you would block the view. So yeah, I'm trying to read this. It's a little bit confusing to me.
So I have 2 comments. One is, why are we not including that? It's small, but there's office frontage on 3rd Avenue as well. And then the other comment is this, I'm pretty sure were you on the commission when we reviewed Draper University on 3rd Avenue? We put in a condition of approval there that the windows into the Benjamin Franklin building on that side of the street, they could not simply pull like blackout shades
Right.
across the windows and leave them.
Well, and it seems like that's what this condition of approval is saying. So I guess I'm confused by the opaque tinting phrase in here. But it looks like the intent of the proposed condition of approval is that the windows are going to be kept open and you can't put a bunch of storage in front of them. To me, that's what it's saying, right? The opaque tinting is, maybe it's because I don't understand what that means, but that's confusing me.
So if we took that out,
Your blinds or other window coverings or other window obstruction, yeah. I think, what was the word, storage?
well, I was suggesting that instead of boxes, put storage. I mean, it could be shelving.
I feel like window coverings kind of covers that. It's going to keep the windows free of obstruction. To me, that's.
If I may, we're certainly very open to this condition. A lot of times our tenants will have blinds that are like white, but they still allow light, right? But they're really just Claremont's pretty easy because it doesn't get direct sun during the afternoon, only in the morning, and so who doesn't love morning sun, right? It's not baking on you. But we understand what you're looking for, and so some verbiage that we could potentially propose. We're supportive of this condition, but it's just that you want to see human activated spaces in that area, and you don't want to see dead storage. You don't want to see. I mean, there's other things we don't want to see, like garbage cans, right, under people's desks and things like that. And those are actually things that we put in our rules and regulations and our leases with our tenants because we don't like to see them either. But we want human-activated spaces that aren't obstructing the view into the building, and also, are kept in, a cleanly manner, something of that nature, and that would give us the flexibility to still, do some tinting if we needed to or what have you, if we needed to do a band at the bottom or something. But we're open to whatever you'd like to see here. But those were just a few comments as far as verbiage.
Do we need to have the specific word smithing nailed down right now, or can we have it approved with like an understanding of?
If it's going to be a condition going to impose, I think for the applicant, for the commission, and for the public, we need to have the language nailed down now.
Okay. Well, visibility in buildings tearing the ground floor basement, keeping windows free of blinds, perhaps.
I mean, one option based on what we've heard is it could say by keeping windows activated and uncluttered.
Uncluttered, I think, again, that is the point, like from my viewpoint, when it was brought up in the first place. So, maybe it can be worded, provided by keeping windows free of obstruction or by designating, I don't know.
So
It's a hard one.
is the way this condition is constructed, it sounds like the first part is what we don't want and the last part is what we do want? Is that correct?
We don't want blinds. We don't
It
want
says
tinted
and
windows.
or by designating lobbies, meeting rooms,
We don't-
rooms, or other gathering activity spaces.
Right, well, that was Mr. Field called human activated space, which, I think that's what the latter part is talking about. I think the front part is like, we just don't want the windows blocked, tinted, or obstructed with boxes and clutter.
Okay.
For
So how
the
about
pedestrian
Just took out
benefit.
that whole middle part about what we don't want and just say what we do want.
Yeah. That could accomplish it.
Well, I I can't speak for the applicant, but I suspect they are planning to have some offices along the ground level, not just lobbies, meeting rooms, break rooms. And so I think the intent of this condition was the city's preference is to have public spaces like lobbies, meeting rooms, break rooms at that ground level. But if there are offices, the offices were supposed to be, the public was supposed to be able to see into those spaces.
Right. Does this wording accomplish that?
Unobstructed view.
Okay, I heard two comments at once.
Does this accomplish that, the wording?
Well, it definitely doesn't address the clutter, but I think the goal was we were working to make sure that the view into the offices would be unobstructed, and that the goal was to have public spaces at the ground floor. This doesn't speak to the clutter issue. What was your question?
Unobstructed view is what we're looking for, I think.
So you could say ground floor interior visibility along South Claremont Street. Visibility into the building's interior on the ground floor shall be maintained by providing an unobstructed view of activity activity inside the building or something of that nature.
Unobstructed, clutter-free.
Unobstructed, clutter-free view of activity within the building.
I'm not sure what the word unobstructed is doing for us.
Well, it means
I mean-
something doesn't obstruct your view.
But I mean, I would just be satisfied if you could view into it. I mean, it could be partially obstructed, but just so you could see there's something going on behind the glass.
So part of the reason why I would think you would want some type of glazing band from 2 or 3 or 4 feet down is because so many of your office furniture now is open platform. And you don't have privacy desks.
That's true.
And you're probably not going to have that many fixed office walls on a ground floor. So I think that could help. But is that a architectural planning review process when it goes for permitting?
I agree with you, actually. I think that would be an actual, if there are going to be desks along that actually is a good way to block the clutter. Which is going to, the wording of it is a challenge.
Right. But we've got an architect here who could tell us how to word it.
I think all we would add, we would take exactly what Ron said and just say, but in the event there is clutter, there's, it shall be mitigated and to staff satisfaction or what have you, and that could be done either through translucent film or, some other means. Exactly. Yeah, we would prefer not to have the film on the glass, so we're going to encourage our tenants to make it look nice because we want the building to, anyway. But so you can take what Ron said and just add, or clutter unless, the clutter is hidden.
Can you repeat, Ron?
I didn't expect this to be such a drawn out.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Ground floor interior visibility along South Claremont Street. Visibility into the building's interior on the ground floor shall be maintained by providing an unobstructed, uncluttered view of activity. And I think we would understand that. All right, you don't want to see the garbage cans, but you want to see the people who are producing the garbage.
I think that captures the
I guess
sentiment.
that'd be one way
Yeah,
to
I
look
think
at
that captures the sentiment. I think we're aligned.
I'm not sure if that.
Yes.
Okay.
That'll be added when we.
Okay.
Was there another condition?
Well, it was, this is the one where I was unclear if it's subject to more traffic, but it was, the concern was around the businesses on 3rd Avenue and noting the amount of construction and the amount of time it's going to take. it's one thing to have it on Fourth Avenue, which I think is more of a thoroughfare eastbound, but, there are a lot of small businesses on that Third Avenue, right on that block. And so my concern would be, what do we do to protect those businesses?
Yeah, it'd just be basically you would be taking public spaces and making them private spaces for a few businesses. So that'd be, that would be, that'd be questionable, to do that, because let's say, if you're the business across the street, is that okay? Where would how close would the business have to be that you went, and then how would you monitor it and do that? That would be the hard part of it too, even if you decide to do that. But basically that's what you're doing. You're taking a public downtown parking space and making it a private space for a few businesses.
Okay, so I think the specific concern that I've heard voiced by speakers and also in writing is they just don't want the construction vehicles or the construction
Oh yeah, and we can
workers
definitely
taking those spaces.
Yes, and that definitely they will not. Again, it's always hard to control and monitor, but we do the construction worker parking plan, which is part of their conditions of approval, do make them designate where they go. Like right now, they are supposed to be at the Fifth Avenue, whatever, the Workers Resource. They have an area there where they've rented some spots there. Now that they have their garage open, they should be using that as much as possible. And again, that could even be, they might be using the garage that's constructed now for this new construction. That would be, until that gets occupied, that might be another temporary use at certain phases of it. But yeah, we certainly would be trying as much as possible to keep, to patrol that, because they certainly will not be allowed to park there. And again, so that's a constant battle during construction, because we had the same thing happen when the two Third and El Camino, that was, trying to, again, they were not allowed to park along Third Avenue in those spaces, yet we were having to patrol that and keep them out and stuff. So, so the construction worker parking plan will try as best it can to monitor that.
I think it goes beyond parking. It goes to keeping the sidewalks open so that customers can get to these businesses. And
Right, and then
we don't want to see happen here what's happened on Van Ness Avenue in San Francisco, where businesses have closed because they didn't get any customers.
And again, as they said, with this construction, obviously there's going to be construction on Third Avenue, but most of the activity will be off of Claremont, and so we will pretty much have them be maintaining that Third Avenue sidewalk. Now, will it be possibly a detour like they have around it? But we will try our best to keep the pedestrians on that side of Third Avenue across that spot so that they can get to the retail spaces next to them. Yeah, that will definitely be a consideration.
So, you want to craft it?
This is a hard one. I don't know part of me doesn't think we need a specific condition for approval if there is going to be a construction traffic management plan that is going to carefully consider the needs of the existing businesses.
To keep the access free and clear to those businesses, definitely.
So.
Okay. And then I guess my suggested condition of approval for, actually it's part C. Well, no, because it's one set of conditions of approval for both projects.
No,
So
but your
having to do with-
specific one was on C. I think it was on C. You're talking about the mural.
I'm talking about the mural, but we only have one set of conditions of approval.
Through the chair, we do have two separate conditions of approval.
It's a separate one.
So,
For B and C.
Yeah. It has its own for the modification of.
So attachment 2 is relevant for the proposed project at 406 East 3rd. Attachment 4 is relevant for the modification to 405 East 4th.
Do you want to do a vote on B first and then talk about?
Sure.
Through the chair, there has been some concerns on the elevation on Third Avenue. Prior to our vote, are there any specific requests of the applicant that we could make to see if we can come to an agreement on that elevation for recommended for B?
And then how would that work? Would we postpone a vote on this if we want to
Review?
provide the applicant with an opportunity to toss some other ideas around and then vote on it? How long would we have to wait before we voted on it?
Well, I think if you're going to request the applicant to do something with the Third Avenue elevation, you'll need to let the applicant know what you're looking for. Because again, we have worked with the applicant, with Larry Cannon, the city's design review consultant, to come up with that elevation. We feel it is adequate, otherwise we would not be recommending approval. So if the commission is saying that that elevation is not adequate, then we would need specific direction as to what you need to have added. So that would be the first thing.
Okay.
Second thing, you could vote to deny the project.
I find the design changes appealing. I have no problems with the current design as it's been modified from the study session.
And I would like to see more of the darker color brick on the left-hand side, more in keeping with what was going on the Claremont side and the railroad side.
If it is something as finite as detail as that, you could impose that as a condition of approval and indicate that the final design needs to be reviewed and approved by the zoning administrator. We've done that type of approach in the past, but
Yeah, so the commission's voting on what the applicant has applied for. I mean, so you could ask the applicant if they want to, you know, if they're agreeable to making that design change, but we can't vote on conditions that, we can't impose conditions that the applicant, that differ from the planning application before you and haven't been agreed to by the applicant. And so if the applicant is not amenable to those design changes, then the commission's other option is to vote to deny the project that's before you tonight.
And then what happens if it's denied? Then is it resubmitted?
It could be appealed to the city council.
it would be appealed to the city council. But if you're indicating that brick should be added to the Third Avenue elevation at a darker color, and you want to specify that as a condition, we could talk to the applicant, but I think given the way that we've worked out the design up to this point, we could probably work something out, but I don't want to speak for the applicant. You'd have to ask the applicant themselves, if that is what your issue is.
And then it would be approved by the zone administrator after that?
Yeah, unless, that would be a recommendation rather than holding it over for whatever amount of time. It'll probably take about a month to draw it up, agendize it, bring it forward to you, review it. I mean, if that's the sense of, I can't speak for Commissioner Mallory, if that is, one of the keystones of what your issues are, then I think if you can articulate it, we can talk to the applicant and see if there's some way to craft a condition that would respond to your particular interest in terms of the design on Third Avenue.
Am I the only one who has an issue?
Through the chair, I would like to hear other concerns if there are specifically on that side. I don't have any specific items. I have been thinking if I were to make any changes at all on the 3rd Street side, I'd love to see, and I think this is an architectural component that is lacking in our city, and that is a live wall or two on the left-hand side. And per Chair Whitaker saying that the window mullions may be a little bit larger and darker than what she would like to see, if I'm understanding what you were saying, Diane. I think that the shading on these drawings make them look considerably larger than they really are. So that just might be, because of how it looks in this setting. They just look bulky, but they're shades. So that's part of the problem. But I would not be voting against this project as it sits, as it's presented to us tonight, architecturally.
It's up to you, Ellen.
It's not up to me. Yeah.
Is there a way to do that so that it's recorded? Is it? Maybe you could give the plan to the commission. Maybe you could speak from the mic.
Don't we have an overhead camera at the podium?
Which facade, and then maybe we'll put it up on the screen. Do we need to focus on? You want that to be brick? Okay, so let's put a render.
Mike,
Hold on.
I think what we'll do is pull it up on the screen, and then Mike, you can speak from the podium.
Yep, up, down.
You got it.
3.01.
That one.
Yes. Okay, now laser pointer.
So, Mike,
Back
if you
to
could
the
just go
microphone.
down to the podium and speak from there, that would help a lot.
Oh, she has one too.
Okay.
To me, this looks very industrial.
Okay, Craig, get up here.
Okay, so that looks very industrial
Got
to
it.
me. You have
What-
your flat windows right here.
Yes.
And you have your industrial stuff here. Then a block or two up, you've got historical buildings on Third
Yep.
Avenue and central neighborhood to the other direction. So,
Yes.
Rendell, could you go up to East Claremont? Okay, here we've got some color that breaks it up. We have some color that breaks it up and breaks it up. Okay, now go down. And then here, there's no color that breaks it up. So if there could be this color brick applied in this area, so it was on par with Claremont and Railroad, then it wouldn't look so industrial.
So this is, so based upon what you're saying, will you go get that laser pointer for me real quick? Would you be willing to? He's a full service architect. So that entire element is shaded because it is showing, trying to show a recess. That entire element, hang on, Craig, is all this. So see this brick right here?
Yes.
This entire element is all that same brick.
How would I know that?
Don't get mad at me.
I'm not mad.
Blame
I'm
Blame
not
him.
mad. I'm just wondering how I would know that.
You're totally correct.
Go to the other elevation so they can see that same scenario there.
So
Graphically, because that space is so far behind it, in order to maintain.
Speak in the microphone, please.
That space to the right, which is also it's behind 3 stations of retail space, is so far back. What we do is we ghost it. We ghost the graphics so you focus on what you see up front in your front eyes. The reality is it's all the same materials But since it's 50 to 100 feet back, if we made it all the same graphic color, you would think it was in the same flat plane. It would be deceptive, right there.
Look at your computer screen. That'll show you.
See, that's all the same materials. It's just simply set back because of how far it is behind. If something we learn in architectural school, to make sure that the graphics show what we're trying to do.
Which we should change.
But that's all brick right there. The windows are the most we're allowed by code because we have a property line there. It's stepped back, so you've got the brick, and then you have the layer of the stucco behind it that steps back. There's an awful lot of detail there. And like I said, with the maximum amount of windows, and there is no reduction in the quality of materials. It just looks like that because of the shading. And that's the case in both back facades that are stepped back. What you see from Claremont as well as what you see from Third. Now I understand the confusion.
And so I know that we went to the rendering here. If you look at the elevations, there is a note that calls it out as brick on the elevations.
It's too small, I can't read it.
Yeah, I know, and the elevations are tough.
It's going to be as nice and as finished as the elevations right on the street. It just looks ghosted because it's set back so far.
All right. I can live with that.
Okay. So we're ready for a vote on Part B. Who would like to make the motion? Someone?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
To approve the site plan and architectural review for the construction of a new mixed-use building, site development planning application for tree removal, and tentative parcel map to merge 4 parcels into 1 parcel based on the findings of approval in Attachment 1 and subject to the conditions of approval in Attachment 2.
Do I have a second?
Also with the
Yeah, I'm assuming that
have-
includes the condition that we read into the record.
Correct.
Regarding visibility of the interior.
Including the condition that read into the record about visibility on the ground floor space.
Thank you. Now do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion carries 3-1. Now on to item C, for the modifications to the building at 4th Avenue on the north elevation. No additional condition of approval.
I'll just share my viewpoint, is that I understand what you're seeing, your concern, and I would support it, but I do believe that it is meant to be immediately, like, as soon as it's approved, contemplated approval, it will probably be the first thing that's covered up in scaffolding, and it would, it seems to me like it's an issue that will be mitigated just through the actual construction.
So this might help you. The 4th Avenue project by Windy Hill was approved by the Planning Commission in July of 2017.
Okay.
So that might help give you a reference as to how long these projects take.
But the construction on that project has been in progress for quite a while. Okay. So as soon as the construction starts.
Construction commenced September.
Yeah. So as soon as the construction starts on this project, that wall is going to be covered up.
One more question for Mike. How long was the 2 levels of underground garage under construction?
The garage takes 6 months to excavate, and then we start to come back up out of the ground. And at that point, probably another 4 months to get it out of the ground. So call it conservatively a year from the time we commence to when we'll be covering that, till we'll be going vertical.
Right. Yeah.
We go vertical with steel, and that's only a 6-week lead time. So from the time we go vertical, the steel goes up really, really quickly. and that will obviously obscure it. So I would say, for the commission's consideration, I would consider it, 12 months would be how long that facade would be visible. Now, keep in mind, we're not completing 4th and Claremont for 4 months. So there's really a 8-month lag between when we'll have a complete building to when we'll have vertical steel on the second building.
There's also the getting through the building permit process.
So yes, but how that works typically is we'll do a demolition and excavation permit, a foundation permit, and a superstructure permit. That way we can start work as rapidly as possible on a demolition and excavation while we're reviewing all of the superstructure plans, because those take the longest to review. But that's a process that we've done twice now with the city. Like I say, we started demo 2 months after approval on 4th and Claremont.
Will the city issue a demo permit without approved drawings for the superstructure?
I think
No,
they have
this
to-
is a building question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
Yes. We've done so in the past because it's with the first permit. So normally with larger projects within the city, we'll go ahead and issue the demolition permit when they come in with the demolition and foundation permit. The idea behind that, and that's not something that's normally in a building code, that's a local San Mateo amendment. And that was because we didn't want the building to be demolished and then the site to remain vacant, which happened with one project in San Mateo. So the idea here, although it's not a guarantee, is that if the applicant is going to the expense of demolishing the building, pulling the building permit, which does involve substantial fees to construct the underground garage and the foundation, then in that case, we would issue that permit.
Okay. Okay, so we'll get rid of that idea and ask for a motion to approve C.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the site plan and architectural review modification for a modified exterior wall design based on the findings for approval in attachment 3 and subject to the conditions of approval in attachment 4.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
This decision of the Planning Commission is final unless appealed within the timeframe specified in the San Mateo Municipal Code.
Thank you all. Move on to reports and announcements.
Yes, this Friday, it is this Friday, May 31st, we'll be having the field trip, we have noticed it, to Oakland. Please, I know, Mike, you can't make it, but please do let Roscoe, I think we resent out the email. Ellen, you said you would meet us here and then drive over, whether or not you're planning on us providing a shuttle over there for the start of the field trip, or whether you're just going to meet us over there. So just get back to Roscoe saying, I'll meet you in Oakland, or I'll meet you in San Mateo.
Can I tell you now?
Sure.
I'll meet you at City Hall.
Okay. And then, John, you can just let us know at your leisure.
It is? 7 minutes. Okay.
And it should be the morning only. We've got a few sites we're going to take a look at, but you should have your afternoons free and clear. On June the 3rd, the City Council will be hearing another project that Rendell is a project manager for, the Cary School. So that'll be a public hearing on June the 3rd. Rendell's had a very busy May and June. 2 meetings upcoming at the beginning of June. On Saturday, June the 8th, 2019, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., 12 noon, at the main library. And then subsequently, for the people who can't make it Saturday, June 8th, from 10 to noon at the main library. On Monday, June the 10th, from 6:30 to 8:30 at the Hillsdale High School cafeteria. We'll be having the next series of general plan workshops, and the topic there will be identifying potential areas of change within San Mateo. So where do we think changes may occur over the next 10, 20, 30 years in terms of the general plan itself?
Is that specific to location or just types of things that will change, or both?
I think it's more identifying, okay, where do we think changes may occur? As part of that discussion, may say, well, here's where we also think change won't occur, that we want to have maintained. So before we get into the options of here's what we're going to have in those areas, it's more where do we see the areas of change over the long term for San Mateo. Then the next series of workshops would be about, okay, if we do make an assumption about the areas of change, what type of change do we see occurring in those areas? I think one necessarily leads into a discussion of the other, so there might be some blending. But again, the intent initially is just to identify the areas of change. I think the commission may be aware that each of these segments of the general plan is set up as a series. So the series starts off with public workshop, then general plan subcommittee, planning commission, city council. So this thing about the areas, identifying the areas of change, would go through that. And then as we look at what would occur within those areas of change, go through the same process: public workshops, general plan, planning commission, city council. Well, that's part of the reason that the timeline for completion of the general plan has been extended beyond what was originally anticipated. Excuse me. Right now, for the Planning Commission on June 11th, we have no items. So you will have that night free in terms of the Planning Commission. On June the 20th, if you're interested, we have our biannual neighborhood meeting with Sarah High School. There are a couple of special special overlay zones, Sarah High School, St. Matthews. We have meetings twice a year just to check in with the neighborhood to see if things are going in accordance with the conditions of approval. The operations are happening basically as they had expected. So that's it for the upcoming meetings, and that concludes staff's announcement. Oh, I will say that the time period to submit applications for Planning Commission is closed. They'll be occurring in the beginning of June, and I think the intent is to have something, to have things in order for the council to vote at their June 17th meeting. But that's kind of what the tentative schedule is as of today.
So did you mention